Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. My apologies for being late. I'm Gerald Van Jackson. I'm chair of this committee, and it's taking place in the Guildhall. And just in terms of any fire regulations, etc., we're not expecting an alarm. So if it goes off, it's real, and we need to meet outside Queen Victoria's statue. And if you've signed in, do sign out. Please make sure, colleagues, that you speak into the microphone so that your words are recorded for posterity and for the 1 million or 3 people watching online. So let's quickly just run through to make sure everybody's introduced. Juliet?
Good morning, I'm Juliet Gillan, the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council.
Okay, and members of the committee, Peter?
Peter Candlish, Eastern Queenswater Ward Councillor.
Mary Vallely, Ward Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
And nice to see you, Mary.
Judith Smythe, Vice Chair of this committee and elected member for St Jude Ward.
Asghar Shah, Councillor for Cosham and Wimmering.
Thank you. David?
Dave Ashmore, one of the Fratton councillors, and I'm standing in today for Chris Atwell.
Hugh Mason, Councillor for St Jude Ward.
Richard Adair, Councillor for Nelson Ward.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Matthew Cordy, Member for Hilsey.
And your wingman?
Good morning. Councillor Derek North for Cosham and Wimmering.
Nice to see you all. Okay, colleagues from the Planning Department.
Chair.
Judith, hello.
I just wondered why we didn't have minutes to approve.
We'll get to that in a minute, but shall we introduce everybody first? David.
Morning, Chair. David Hodges, Head of Development Management.
Simon Turner, I'm a team leader in the Planning Department.
Lovely. Okay, and then we have people who want to come talk. Well, no, we need our colleague from Democratic Services.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
And then people who come to speak at the committee. Russell.
Councillor Russ Simpson, Hilsey Ward, reading deputation for 81 Stubbington.
Lovely. Ray?
Councillor Raymond Dent, just here to observe.
Just make sure we behave, is that right, Ray?
Carrie-Anne Wells, Agent for Applecore. I'm representing 6 of the items on the agenda today.
Thank you.
Joel Walker, applicant for 65 Copner Road.
Lovely. Councillor Hunt?
Good morning, members, everybody. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt. I'm a ward member speaking today on ward member for Nelson, which covers Stanshaw, Tipner, North End and Buckland. So I'm here speaking on 36 Chichester Road and 22 Gladys Avenue, both in Nelson Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you much indeed. Hello, at the back.
Hello there. I'm Steve Bundy, and this is Joan Bundy with the residents at 38 Chichester Road, objecting to 36, the HMO suggested there.
Thank you very much indeed. And sir, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Chris Scollage. I live at 31 Hayland Avenue, and I'm here on behalf of item number 4.
That's very kind. Thank you very much indeed for coming, everybody. Okay. Mr. Walker has had a word with me, and he's in quite a lot of pain, so it seems to be fair, nice if we could do his one early so that he doesn't have to sit around. Councillor Hunt, I know you've been spending time with the doctor. How are you feeling today?
Just go along with the agenda, Chair. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Well, no, it's always good to see people and make sure we're going to... Okay, then we can't... oh, Judith, sorry.
To ask why we haven't got minutes for the meeting.
Well, yeah, so, minutes for the meeting, a previous meeting.
Because it was a 2-week turnaround this time. It was brought forward from the 9th. So today's and the minutes of the previous one will be both brought on the 30th of April.
Fine, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm away next week, so which is why the time got wiggled. Okay, so the only apology we have is Chris Atwell, and Councillor Ashmore, you are being Chris today, at least in the Planning Committee, not in his other duties. Okay, colleagues, any declarations of interest? Councillor
Yes, Chair.
Adair.
I sought advice on this. I have a personal interest relating to number 2, St Augustine Road. I have a personal interest in a property which is situated about 50 metres from the application on the southern side of Highland Road, but I will make my mind based upon the evidence I hear regarding this application.
Thank you very much indeed. It's one of these issues where you own so many properties around the place, isn't it, Councillor Adair? Okay, so, David, if we do 81 Stubbington first, would it be okay if we then brought forward 65 Cotner to be second? Will your technology cope with that?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go through the applications as they are before us. So, 81 Stubbington Road, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, as you can see, the proposal is for extension and enlargement of existing housing multiple occupation from a 6-bed, 6-person to a 7-bed, 8-person at 81 Stubbington Avenue. So the scheme was deferred from the previous meeting on the 19th of March for clarity over the planning history, but we are considering the matter afresh, so we're starting from first principles, Chair. So the site and location that you can see there, so it was formerly under standard doctor's surgery, site on the corner plot, hence why it has a large rear extension that you'll see in photos. So, as I say, these are the photos of the site that you saw 2 weeks ago, and then in the far left you can see the later doctor's extension there. Typical property of the area on the corner plot, but as noticed, we've got this larger rear, more modern wing, and in effect a parking space to the side here. So you can see how it's currently set out as a HMO with existing letting bedrooms and communal kitchen and dining space. As an existing HMO, in terms of your balance and mixed communities policies in the local plan and your HMO SPD, this makes a difference. So we are at 7 out of 52 properties, so that's 13%. But this does not change the fact that we're already over the 10%. We'll get to the point about clarity on the planning history in a moment in the presentation. So the scheme also involves physical extensions to the building, so building out on the side here to create the loft space and the additional accommodation in the roof, so building out over this hip. So this is existing elevations of the building and its existing layout where we've got letting rooms at ground and first floor, and then the rear shared communal space. So the extensions bring out this hip to a gable end here to provide accommodation, and with a rear dormer that you can see at the top left here. And from the
David, hold on a second.
Sorry,
Mary?
David, when you move the cursor, I want to throw up. If you could do it as little as possible, it'd be really, really helpful.
Apologies. Will do. So just moving on to the floor plan, one change is that the window is added into the rear elevation of the communal living space, which we've negotiated out as an improvement to the light and aspect, because the property otherwise has these high-level windows along the left-hand side there on the side elevation. And then the additional alterations create a double occupancy room in the loft space. Okay, so the application was deferred from the previous meeting due to concerns and clarity over the planning history of the site. So the first and fundamental aspect is that in terms of applying your policies, the test hasn't changed. So we're still at a situation whereby we have no increase in the number of HMOs within the 50-metre radius. What I will do, actually, I'm going to skip on a couple of slides just to get you to the timeline. So what we've done is set out in the report the timeline of events which happened around 5 years ago. So we received an application in January 2020 for the change of use of 81 to the HMO. And at the time, it's evident that a 50-metre radius assessment was done at the time, and it was below the 10%, so correctly, it was within our policy. Evidently, what happened was that on 11th of March, a subsequent application at number 73, which is also within the 50-metre radius of number 81, was also approved as a HMO. That changed the numbers of figures and increased the number of HMOs within 50 metres of 81 to over 10%. What happened is that when the ad application number 81 was approved, which is a couple of months later, 3 months later in July, evidently it wasn't rechecked in terms of the 50 metres to include the additional HMO at Stubbington Avenue. And so at the point that number 81 was granted, we were at 6 in 51 properties, which we were over the 10% as shown there. Just to provide clarity on the figures that you've got in the report, what was just to provide clarity on how we've ended up with additional HMOs within a 50-metre radius of number 81, but still within the scope of that policy, and that is the approval of number 78, which was done in 2022, and just to show you how that can be. So this is number 81 and the 50-metre radius around number 81. These are the HMOs which fell within its scope when it was first assessed. This is the additional HMO that was granted at number 73. But number 78, not a HMO at this point, does lie within the 50-metre radius of number 81. However, when we came to do the assessment on number 73, you can see these HMOs drop out of the 50-metre radius. So that's how we can end up with a scenario whereby the HMO here is approved, and it's still policy compliant, but it means that there is an additional HMO within the 50-metre radius. Apologies. Within the 50-metre radius of number 81. So just finally, in terms of the timeline, the reason that there's an additional property recorded now is that number 62 was subdivided. At some point became lawful. We're unclear when that happened, but it was added to the property gazetteer as it became lawful over time, which is why you have the additional number. And so where we are and where we end up today, where we have number 81 as 7 of 52 HMOs, which is 13% as previously advised. Chair, clearly we regret, as the local planning authority, if an error took place 5 years ago. We're conscious that when that happened, we just gone into national lockdown with COVID, and there was significant disruption to the service. The service was under considerable pressure at that time. One of the things that I note is the length of time that it took to deal with both the original HMO at number 81 and number 73. So those time periods are around 6 months to deal with those. That introduced that risk of error occurring, which did in this case. Today, we're much more efficient. We have much checks and balances in to avoid those situations arising again. One thing I can point to in terms of the agenda today, with the exception of this application, all of the other HMO applications, so that's another 7, were all received from January onwards, so we're dealing with them within 2 to 3 months. So the risk of the data changing over time is much less. As Mr Turner will advise, we regularly get the officers to recheck if we've had an application that's been in for too long. Also, I would add that we're 5 years on. During that time, we've processed a number of applications, a considerable number of HMOs within this area. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first time we've identified this error occurring, so we're satisfied it's not symptomatic of a persistent and recurring failure in the process. And were it to be, we would have expected that to have become apparent by now, considering 5 years have elapsed. And just as a final point, we note that in terms of objections to the scheme, we had, they're listed in the report. The only objection from Stubbington Avenue itself comes from the adjacent property, and they've withdrawn their request to speak as they were satisfied with the proposals. So notwithstanding that we're under our tests in the SPD, we've been over our balanced and mixed communities for a number of years. We don't have evidence of harm from the adjacent properties in relation to some of the factors that are identified in the HMO SPD in relation to noise, disturbance, antisocial behaviour, etc. So notwithstanding the fact we've been over that figure, we don't have reports of harm coming from the adjacent properties during that period. Hopefully that explains how we've ended up in the position that we are, Chair. But just returning to the fundamental point, in terms of our count, nothing has changed. The scheme complies with our policy, and as before, we recommend the application for approval.
Thank you, David. I think it's we should record that the 10% rule in our policy is very important, and that okay, a mistake has happened here, but it's a very regrettable mistake, and we do need to make sure that when their policy is there, that it's observed. So I hope that the colleagues in the planning office, and I'm glad to hear your reassurance, but that people do keep a very close eye on this, because this is a policy that the council has passed. It's been supported by the inspectors, and we need to make sure that it is observed by everybody. So a very regrettable mistake. Okay. So deputations, Councillor Simpson, welcome.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think Councillor Hugh Mason actually wanted to say something, but I'm not sure if it's me first before his comments.
Well, let's age go before beauty.
Yeah, I don't mind. Hugh, if you need to say something, please do.
I presume that if age goes before beauty, Hugh would be second, but anyway. Hugh, do you want to, as cabinet member?
Having heard that explanation, I wonder how far it was not an error, but a result of the fact that HMOs are not distributed evenly, and what might be under 10% in one case would alter the percentage in a neighbouring area, but which you can't take it into consideration. So it is not
David.
Not so much a fault, but an outcome of the way in which we do these
No,
things.
Hugh, in this one, it is an absolute clear and absolute fault. David?
Yes, I mean, there is, if we're able to turn back time, ideally we would have been able to pick up the additional approval, and that would have changed the acceptability of the original application. But your wider point is correct. At each point, okay, I'm leaving it there. At each point, the address changes, the data changes. At each point, there's a further development, the data changes. If a corner plot is redeveloped for a block of flats, the data changes and we increase the numbers. So, yes, at all times, it is fluid, and we can't guarantee that we are saying no more HMOs in a particular area. It just depends on what the data says at the time of the application.
But in this case, it is clear that a mistake was made, and we need to learn from that. So let's go down to Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was going to have that in the speech as well, but thank you, Lord Mayor. I was going to originally speak on this application a few weeks ago. However, I fell unwell, but due to the nature of the application, I'm glad it was deferred and is back today. As I'm sure the committee has read points 8.5 to 8.9, they are hopefully as equally as baffled as I was of how we got to 13.46%, 33% over the council's policy of 10% within a 50-metre radius. If I may highlight 8.9, looking at the council's records, it is evidence that another HMO at 73 Somerton Avenue within a 50-metre radius of number 81 was granted planning consent on March 11th, 2020. This occurred after the assessment that was made for number 81 in respect of the mix and balance of the community in proximity to the site on February the 3rd, but before the application. The application was determined on the 28th of 2020. If this had been identified at the time, this would have brought the percentage of HMOs within the 50-metre radius of number 81 to be at 11.76%. Now, Lord Mayor, may I remind you of a planning committee a few months ago concerning HMO and Gladys Avenue, where you were told you couldn't add an identified illegal HMO to the register because it should be on a first-come, first-served business. Well, it seems to me we don't know who was first at all. Returning back to Somerton Avenue, at this point, we are in 2020 and we're already 50% over the 10% within a 50-metre radius at 11.76%. So how do we get to 13.46%? Well, we're essentially told in 8.10 that geography and mathematical radius isn't the planning department's strongest department. It is a mess, Lord Mayor. Clearly our records then weren't up to date and probably still not up to date today, with clear evidence that other close HMOs are not even looked at when potentially going over the 10% in another radius. You can't be surprised that residents are not trusting of the planning department nor the council. As it stands, we have 7 HMOs in the 50-metre radius, with currently around 36 applicants and 36 tenants in all the properties. If it was 5 properties, it should be, even with sui generis in each, that would come to around 35 max. If the application goes through today, I fear it may give confidence to the other 3 HMOs that they can expand, and with sui generis could be 49 tenants, almost 50 more than what should be allowed within the 50-metre radius and not a mixed and balanced community. I hope the committee refuses this application as we are 33% over our policy of the 10% with a 50-metre radius. I believe if this application is voted in favour today, it will show the wrong message to our residents that this council and committee doesn't own up and take responsibility to our mistakes. We should not make the mistake even more of a failure. If the applicant wants to go to the government inspector, let them, because at least then we can hold our head high as a council and say we made a mistake, we're not going to add to this mistake. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Okay, colleagues, questions. Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you.
Oh, carry on. You're not on my list on this one. You should be. Hold on. Okay. I will. I don't know. There must be another failure. So this within democratic services. So if you did ask to speak, let's be accepting. Carry on. Welcome.
Do we need to vote upon whether we need to discuss the application?
We're on deputations.
Deputations first, and then
Yes.
we'll come to proposals after the questions. No. But we'll do it in the order. Carry on.
Firstly, I want to thank the officer in getting this back to committee so quickly and the efforts required for that. As David has explained, it's unfortunate that an error was made during a very difficult period for the department. However, this error has absolutely no bearing on this application before you. The property was granted planning to be a HMO and is currently tenanted by 6 individuals. Portsmouth planning policy has sought to reapply the 10% density to existing HMOs previously, which has been challenged and won at appeal over half a dozen times. In each case, the inspector concluded that the increase of occupants to an existing HMO would not cause further imbalance to the community, as the property was already a HMO property, and its use would not change by adding occupants. The 10% rule or density for this application is not relevant at all, and deferral should not have been made on this basis, though I can appreciate members wanted to understand how this happened, which is why I'm here today, having not taken this application straight to appeal. As this was the only reason for deferral, and members had no concerns about design, which I wanted to point out again is one of the more spacious properties in Portsmouth, providing bedrooms far in excess of the required standards. There have been no issues or complaints from this existing 6-bed HMO, and as David mentioned as well, the only objection was withdrawn and was only relevant to a 2-storey extension that we were originally proposing. While I appreciate Councillor Simpson's passionate deputation, I think it should be noted that COVID was a difficult time for the whole country, the whole world even. For one error to have been made by the Planning Department at this time, I do not think it's fair to assume that this is systematic and should happen regularly. We do our own checks as well, and this has not come up before. I trust you will agree with the officer recommending for approval today and save the time and cost for all in taking this to appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, questions? Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you.
So, Judith, just for note, this we don't need to have a discussion about whether this needs planning permission or not. The report is clear that this does need planning permission, so that we'll need to vote on that on that bit. I hope I've got the right one.
Chair, no. You will need to vote on whether it constitutes a change of use. So the application needs planning permission. Our view is that it only needs planning permission for the physical alterations.
Okay, so we have to have 2 votes on 2 different bits of the planning application. Okay, fine. David, sorry, 3rd time lucky. Hold on a second. What we do is the process we go through is the officers do their presentation, then there are deputations, then there are questions from members of the committee, followed by comments which include proposals. So this bit now is on questions. If you have a question, can you ask it now? If you don't have a question, can you not ask it?
I do. I was just... Usually we have to vote on it, but you're saying we don't have to vote on
We do votes when we get to comments.
Okay. Well, I will just say then, was looking at 8.9, and it said that another HMO at 73 Stubbington Avenue, within that 50-metre radius, was granted. Was that one a fresh application? Was it a HMO before? Was that one just an extension, or was it an actual new HMO which would have pushed it over that limit?
It was a new HMO. Yeah, that's why it makes a difference.
Yeah. And although it was on the cusp of lockdown, it says 11th of March. I don't think lockdown started till end of March. So there was obviously a lot going on at the time, though, and a lot of rumours which might have led to things not going smoothly on that one. Okay, that's answered my main question. Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions? Okay, in terms of comments, the advice from David is that the permission, the physical changes do need a planning application and a planning approval, but the additional numbers that the officers feel does not need a planning permission. This is our normal thing, and I'm happy to propose the normal thing to say that we think it does need planning permission because the planning permission that they've got is for 6 people and below only, and therefore this is going to go above, and therefore it is a matter of pure logic that has to mean a planning application. And that we know that additional people mean additional pressure on the local community in terms of traffic, parking, rubbish, and potential antisocial behaviour. So I'm happy to propose that for the additional people that planning application is required. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Adair.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Judith. Oh, Councillor Smythe, sorry to be
It's all
formal.
right, you can call me what you like, really, but I would like to
well, that would be very wrong.
ask us to go back to the plans, please,
Yeah,
so
of
that we
course.
can have an explanation of the physical changes that require planning permission? Because we were very much concentrating on the map.
Yes.
And I'd like to see the plans, please, that show the physical extension, which is the
Yeah. Okay, David.
extensions requiring permission, which we are recommended, are acceptable. I would like to reassure myself that they are acceptable, please. Could we have a very brief presentation of
Yeah.
those?
David?
All you said before was it was extending the roof outwards. Is there anything further we need to know?
Yes. So
Mary, look away.
the extension there is to make a hip to gable extension, which is seeing that on the side there, and then to the rear, attached to that, as you see top right, attached to that is a dormer, and then you see the rear of it there, and then any other physical alteration is in relation to adding this window on the rear here. So in terms of what that means, that creates this loft space where you have a double occupancy room and ensuite and some storage, and as I say, there's minor alterations to the communal living space at ground floor.
And those can't be done under permitted development. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, I think it's that's a good question. That's it. Yes. Apologies. I'm just trying to remember from the last time from the report. It's because we've interpreted this as a principal elevation. So you can't do a roof extension or a dormer on the front principal elevation. You're going to do rear side. So because we view the side elevation, it's got the front door. It's got the main architectural features. Our view is this is the principal, i.e. the front elevation, and therefore an extension on the front needs planning permission.
Surprised at that because I think the front is clearly the front which lines up with all the other fronts. Where's the door in that side, on the side of the building?
So I think that's reasons we came to that conclusion, Chair, is because if you look there isn't a front door.
There is no door.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, slightly unusual situation, but thank you very much. And
Okay. First of all, we have a proposal that we do think that for the change of the numbers, we need planning. Planning application is required. That's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of that? And those against? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So then, in terms of the planning application that is in front of us, as I understand it, and David, please tell me if I'm wrong, this is a current HMO. So this doesn't change the percentage, even recognising that there has been a mistake and we are where we should not be. But we are where we are, and it seems to me, looking at the size of the rooms, etc., that it falls within our regulations. If this was not a current HMO, then this would inevitably be refused. But it is a current HMO, and this is just making it slightly bigger. So I'm sorry, I don't see any grounds that I could see that an inspector would support us if we turn this down, and I think that would be wrong. So I'm therefore happy to propose that planning permission is granted with the usual conditions that David will now enunciate.
Yes, Chair. So as you'll see from the SMAT, the applicant has completed the habitats mitigation. So we've secured that mitigation payment. So we've already got a condition for the time limit, and in accordance with the approved plans, an additional detail on the recommendation. So we would add conditions for water efficiency, provision and retention of bike storage, and to ensure the extensions are constructed. Although I don't actually need that. I would have thought because it's part and parcel of the. For completeness' sake, we'll requirement to complete the extension shown.
Okay, Councillor Smythe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hadn't noticed anything to do with bike storage before that remark. I'd like to be assured there will be a condition on that. Thank you.
So David, I think, has just said that, so that's good. But it's good to keep it real. I also think I would like us to put into the minutes that we recognise the mistake has been made in this area, and that this is regretted, and that the planning department are working to make sure that this doesn't ever happen again. Colleagues, any other proposals? Councillor Cordy.
Based on the evidence that we've had this morning, it's clear that the planning department have made errors in this area. 81 Stubbington Avenue is already 32% over the 10% allowed in a 50-metre radius for a mixed and balanced community. I don't think we should be encouraging further overcrowding of people in this area, and our policy is there for a reason, and I believe this proposal isn't conducive to a mixed and balanced community. I therefore propose that we refuse the application.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Derek North?
I second his proposal.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Ashmore?
Yeah, I'd just like to put on that, as we're doing comments on this one, I think what Councillor Cordy said was right on that one. We do have that 10% rule, and we do have things to stick to it. And I know this is a unique situation that we had here, and it's been explained and expounded upon. But you know, we've, as a committee, we've had to approve things that we might not have personally liked or agree with, but it's been legal and in fitting with our local policy on that. And I'm just worried that this application, it might lead to a precedent down the line where someone else uses it as a kind of way to exploit the existing thing that we've got. I think if this did go to a plan inspectorate afterwards, I think we've got right to say, but we have a rule, and I get it through because of lockdown, it led to errors, backlogs, whatever, but we still have that rule. I'm in agreement with Councillor Cordy there.
Carry on, I'm sorry, this part of the discussion is just for the committee. Hold on, Juliet.
I was going to say, does David Hodges want to come back on that second proposal?
Yes, Chair. I mean, we would need to understand what the reasons for refusal were and what the alleged harm was, which we would need to be able to sustain in front of the inspector, if that's to be a move, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Vallely.
Can I just correct, Matt? It's not 30%; it's 13.3%.
Yes, but I think it's how much it is over the 10. It's a different way of reading statistics. Councillor Smythe.
I agree that that is not a clever way of representing these statistics. The facts are very clear. The space standards are up to our standards. In fact, it's quite a generous property. We've talked about, and I think agreed, that the physical changes that are not permitted to develop are agreeable and will not adversely affect the appearance of the building and its keeping alongside neighbours. I think that the use of this word, the 30%, it's a percent of a percent you're talking about, which is not really very helpful. We have an HMO there which is already acceptable to neighbours, and if they've had any problems, they've sorted them out in a neighbourly way, I presume. And we're just trying to. We're stuck on this point of the 10% in the area, which I think it's very regrettable this has happened. I'm very reassured by the fact that David Hodges has said that he hasn't discovered any other cases of this, even arising out of the chaos of COVID. We've heard also the explanation that the 10% is affected. Even moving from one property 4 or 5 properties down the road can have the effect on that percentage. But nevertheless, we do stick to that, and we're very, very firm about it. And you very sensibly, Chair, added in that we needed to note it in the minutes, that this wasn't something that could create a precedent in any way. This was an unfortunate mistake 5 years ago, and that there have been no other consequences from making that mistake in the area insofar as we know. So I do think it is important that we don't get confused by this. I'd like to second the recommendation you made to agree this application. I think taking this anywhere near an inspector would undermine and make our position as a successful planning authority extremely, extremely suspect in the inspectorate's minds, and I urge you all to vote to approve this application.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Chairman, there have been cases before where we have been in areas where there have been over 10%, and we have tried to resist the increase in numbers from, say, 6 to 7, and we have been overturned by the Planning Inspectorate. It is very clear that for whatever reason this may be, good or bad, over 10% in this area, we have to accept the situation as it is. And it is quite clearly the understanding of the Planning Inspectorate, and I think it is rational that they do so, that an increase of 1 or 2 is not, does not change the overall balance of the community. We have been turned down in the past on this.
Councillor Mason, can I just check, when you're talking about 1 or 2 and 6 or 7, you were talking about people, not houses?
People, not houses, yes.
Thank you. Because I think we need to be very, very clear that the 10% rule is incredibly important, and we will defend it. There has been a mistake in this instance, and there is one additional HMO that should not be there. But it's one house. And
but it is there.
It is there.
And we have to recognise that it is there.
Yeah, absolutely. But it shouldn't have been.
I think it's important, Chair, that the public realise that were there another application in this footprint, this 50-metre radius, we would absolutely not even, we would refuse it straight away.
It wouldn't come near us because we would be turned down by officers. Councillor Shah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. This mistake was made by the officer, not by the applicant. So obviously, they accepted that mistake, and we have to go with that. Otherwise, it's going to go to the appeal, which is no gain.
Yeah. We are, at least most of us, human, and therefore make mistakes. And I am reassured that, that this is the first one that has come up. It doesn't look as if it's systemic. It looks at this as an issue of human error, and therefore not something that is going to reoccur, we hope. Okay, colleagues, any more comments? Councillor Candish.
I must return to my normal seat since I've been trying to get in since the questions section. So I'm just checking, being serious, whether my light is working for you.
You're off to one side.
I will lean this way. There are 3 completely separate issues here. Firstly, there was a cock-up a few years ago. That is acknowledged, and it was a bit unfortunate, I thought, that some of the deputations failed to acknowledge something which was so clearly said in the officer's report. The second issue is the one of substance here, which is the increase in the number of people in the existing property from 6 to 8. I may regret it, but like you, I can see no way to avoid giving it approval because the evidence from the planning inspector is very clear. It will just be knocked back, and that will just cost council taxpayers money and waste officer time. I do want to speak on the third issue, because the third issue is around making sure that people understand this 10% rule. As we often rehearse in here, it's the toughest regulation on the South Coast. It's a barely defensible 10% rule. We worry that it could be taken away. There's nothing like it in the surrounding areas like Havant Gosport. And it is there to limit HMO concentration to ensure a balanced and mixed community. But it is clear that it is not well understood by residents and, frankly, on some of the evidence, by some councillors as well. So even though we've got an explanation today about how it could happen, I'm not sure that everyone really still gets it. So I think a clear action step that I would like in the minutes is that the planning department, with some urgency, put together a resident-friendly language explanation of how HMOs operate and the limits, and include within that things like pictures, because we toggled back, much to Mary's...
It's only when he does the Wizzy bit.
Anyway, we toggled back and forth between two visuals that explain how this could happen, because I think, Chair, as is likely, given the national framework of rules that we are operating under, where we expect to have a positive bias to applications and developers generally frame it so that we have no alternative but to apply, this will occur more often in future as more and more areas get more and more HMOs within them. So I think there's a very important communication point that we need to deal with there. That said, I will be reluctantly forced to support, I forget which order they came in. I will wait for the votes to be called, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure David has taken up those comments. Okay, anybody else want to come in? No, okay, we move to the vote. The first one, which was proposed and seconded, is the vote to refuse. Because I think Judith, your seconding came in after Councillor North seconded the proposal to refuse, and we do. Juliet, am I doing this wrong?
No, you're right. I just wanted to make sure that we get the offer to clarify what the reasons are.
Okay, so Matthew Cordy, can you give the officers the reasons for the refusal?
Absolutely. It's not going to be a mixed and balanced community. We've already got over the 10% there, and we're adding even more people into the area.
Chair, I just have to point out that from the information that you've had and in the report, we are already over the 10%, and we're making no difference to that number in terms of the proportion. So it's not contrary to our own policy and HMO guidance. Whilst additional people would be accommodated in the property, that's also not contrary to our policies at the moment either, Chair. So what I need to understand is the harm. So when in front of an inspector...
I think Councillor Cordy has put his view clearly. Okay, can I see those in favour of the proposal to refuse planning permission, please show. And those against, please show. Okay, let's do that again. Councillor Adair, could you vote for one of the proposals and vote clearly and at the same time as other people? Can I see those people in favour of refusing this application, please show. Okay, thank you very much. Those in favour of refusing this? A higher number, so that proposition falls. So the second proposition was to grant planning permission. Can I see those in favour of granting planning permission, please show. And those against, please show. That is 6-4, planning permission is granted. Thank you. Okay, let's move along.
That does have the cycle condition on it.
It did, yes, as enumerated by the officers during their presentation. If we could now do 65 Copner Road, so Mr. Walker can escape with his back, if that's possible. So. Now, what? And that's page 61, colleagues. Simon, is this you?
It is, Chair. Thank you. We have an application at 65 Copner Road for the change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to an 8-bedroom, 8-person house in multiple occupation. The application is coming to Planning Committee because of 6 valid objections. We have a supplementary matters update in due course, and the applicant here to make a deputation. So we're on the Copner Road towards the southern end. It's a mid-terrace property. It's got a small forecourt you can see on the front, a backyard stroke garden, a bike store is indicated there, and the prior approval GPDC suffix extension is indicated on the plan there as well.
GTPC?
GPDC is just the suffix to the prior approval applications. Sorry if that confuses things. Which it received last year.
I wondered if it was a new branch of the Russian Secret Service.
Thank you. Next slide. There we are, mid-terrace. Thank you. There is the 50-metre radius. With respect to mixed and balanced communities, there are no other HMOs in the radius. So if this property is approved, it would bring the percentage to 1.61%. Existing plans, so a 2-storey property with a rear wing. This would be converted with the prior approval extension I mentioned there at the back to provide the ground floor combined living space at 34 square metres. That's way beyond the 22.5 required under the SPD, supplementary planning document, and there's also a tank stroke laundry room. Otherwise, all the bedrooms have an ensuite, which you can make out bedrooms 7 and 8 there. Then if we go on to the first floor, 3 more bedrooms with en-suites, and then there would be a roof extension achieved under permitted development, which would provide space for 3 bedrooms up there, all with en-suites. All the bedrooms exceed the 10 square metres minimum by 1 or 2 metres in some cases. So in the round, just looking at the numerical guidance, all the rooms exceed the minimum standards, and then in the round, as the configuration of the property, ease of movement, light, etc., outlook, officers are happy to recommend the application on that matter as well. We have had objections set out in the report that are addressed therein. There's the rear roof extension, quite substantial as they often are, achieved under permitted development, and on the bottom image you've got the flat roof rear prior approval extension. And there we are in section to show the amendments to the property. And I've got a series of photographs of the existing property, which of course will be somewhat changed internally with the reconfiguration of rooms, etc., if approved. So various photos. There's the bedroom 8. That will be a view down the light well there. Kitchen, diner, etc. Existing rooms rather than proposed. There's the back garden. So the prior approval extension would extend from the lean-to there, and the rest of the garden to the right. Bedrooms at the upper floors. Existing rooms, and then I think that's probably there's the front of the property. And then I think if we carry on, David. Thank you. So to take you to the supplementary matters report, just for completeness, actually, yeah, we'll do that in a minute. We've received an application. So the second point on the supplementary matters report, just for completeness, we've received an application at 67 Copner Road, which is one to the north, just to let you know. For a dwelling house to an 8-person HMO. That is not determined yet. It was only received a week or 2 ago, so that number is not considered in the data count here. 85 Copner Road is outside the area. It's the property, it's about 3 down from the northeast corner there. It was just for completeness because that number 85 Copner Road is in the 50-metre radius of 296 Queens Road, which is the northwest property there, which is elsewhere on this agenda. So again, it's just for completeness, although 85 Copner Road is within the its western end of the garden, is within the 50-metre radius for 296 Queens Road. It's not inside the radius for 65 Copner Road. We would just like to add some further words to the water efficiency condition as set out in the supplementary matters. And then if we could go right to the top, please, David, to the original HMO radius. There you can see 65 Copner has the point of the arrow pointing to the middle of the property. In the report, the arrow was pointing at 67, just a minor error there. We've corrected it between publication and the presentation you can see here. So in case any of you noticed, a slightly different radius. It hasn't changed the percentage figures, which were non-existing for either 65 or 67. So just to clear that up. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you much indeed. Mr. Walker, welcome.
You ready? Hi all. Firstly, thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you today. I'm the owner of 65 Copner Road. The reason for me speaking to you today and not my agent Carrian/Applecore is I believe it is important for you to speak with the responsible owner and for me as an owner and landlord, not just to hide behind an agent. Following on from my last application in this committee, Councillor Werner Jackson expressed concerns that one of my applications had gone through in two parts. Firstly, a C3 to C4 application and then a certificate of lawful use. I've taken on the advice from this committee and will therefore not be breaking these applications into two parts, and I've integrated his recommendations of going straight to a sui gen planning on this application. I'm extremely excited to be able to speak to you today about the plans at 65 Copner Road. This property will hopefully be the first sustainable HMO across Portsmouth and, from my studies, the rest of the country. This property will be run via solar panels and an air source heat pump, as well as many more eco features. These are all additions that we are starting to add to our properties, as we believe we have a responsibility to not only provide affordable, safe accommodation, but to also provide environmentally friendly, ethical accommodation and do our part to protect the environment for generations to come. This application very nearly didn't make committee today due to it only having 6 validated objections, with the last objection coming in on the same day the planning officer said the grant notice would come out. On the site inspection, I actually told the case officer I was annoyed that it wasn't going to make committee, as I was so passionate to speak to this committee about our new green houses. I urge this application to be granted today, as I hope it will set a precedent for other developers and push them into the direction of sustainable energy, so that we can work as a collective to look after the environment and our futures. Sat in this very room just a few weeks ago, a meeting was chaired by Councillor Kimberly Barrett titled Climate Change and Greening the City, where they spoke about an environmental plan with Hampshire and investment into nature recovery. This property not only has all the above green solar and air source powering, but also integrates bee bricks and bird boxes for the wellness of these animals within this city. All features we are not required to add, but have chosen to add as our company pledge to the environment in this city and country. Portsmouth has an ethical responsibility to support green developments within the city, to not only look after its current residents, but also future generations to come. I'm a local landlord and I oversee the build and management of these properties personally. I'm the 3rd generation of HMO investor in my family and have humongous care for my tenants. As a landlord who owns and manages their own properties, it means my management of tenants is more attentive than a landlord with a property manager on board. My tenants can call or text me at any time, and they actually get listened to, not ignored. Nor will they call up and get put through to an answer phone because an office is shut. I'm also at the property weekly and always give my phone number to direct neighbours should they need me. I believe it is keen to know I've never had an incident in one of my properties, never had the police called, never had a property reported to the council, never had any neighbourhood disputes, never had any antisocial behaviour of any kind, and have never had any negative feedback from any parties whatsoever. The environmental additions we have added into this property cost upwards of £50,000, and there is no direct financial return on this expenditure. We have ethically chosen to do this as our pledge to a green future. This property also benefits from a vast 34 metre squared communal area. All bedrooms are at a minimum company set standard of 10 metres squared and all benefit from ensuite bathrooms. We've also chosen to add additional non-required features to better the product, such as an additional communal toilet, which could be used by the cleaners and or friends of tenants that come over and don't wish to go into someone's room, as well as a laundry room for tenant comfort. As well as a big environmental push, we have also integrated some of the best smart tech on the market into this property, from a commercial Wi-Fi system to heat sensors and external CCTV for the safety of our tenants and the community. It is keen to note that although all bedrooms are 10 metres squared, due to the vast communal area, all bedrooms could actually be at the minimum national size standard of just over 6.5 metres squared, and even if they were that small, which I don't personally agree with, this property would still be compliant. Therefore, any comments stating that some of the rooms are only just meeting 10 metres squared are false. I think it is fair to say that as a company collective, we are pushing harder than any other company in the HMO space to produce the safest, most ethical and most high-tech accommodation on the market. It is commonly known that I personally watch every single committee via live stream. People often question, why do I choose to spend all that time watching planning committees that don't even have my applications in? I choose to invest this time watching them as I want to be able to take on all concerns and comments from both councillors and local communities and try and integrate them into new designs of ours and constantly push for a better and better end product. I would like to conclude by thanking the officer who reviewed and did this report for this application for a very thorough and conclusive report where he mentions private sector housing has no objections. Planning decisions should be based in favour of sustainable development. This development is in a sustainable location. The 1.6% density falls well below the 10% maximum. The layout and room sizes are all satisfactory. Parking is not a reason to withhold planning permission and, in his words, is not defendable. The eco features are a welcome addition to the scheme. No evidence is there linking higher occupancy to antisocial behaviour. He then concludes by saying, it is concluded that the proposed change of use is acceptable and would be in accordance with the relevant policies and therefore recommends approval. I would be really keen, regardless of today's verdict, to speak with any councillors that may have questions for myself, as I do think working together is the best way to provide much needed affordable, safe accommodation for the people of Portsmouth. I would also be very passionate to discuss
Walker,
the new green...
your time is up. Can you bring things to a conclusion?
Yeah, I would also be very passionate to discuss the green features in this house and talk about how these can be featured in all new developments, as I think all developers should be working together to really push for a green future. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, questions? Councillor Ashmore.
Just one about one of the objections there was saying that there was no site notice, and it says in 8.42, in response to the report of there being no site notice, the case officer attended the site again and displayed a fresh notice, which does seem to indicate there wasn't one there. Was that a case of it had been removed for some reason, and will that be an issue as regards, because it needs to be up a certain amount of time, doesn't it? Will that count as it was only up a shorter amount of time, and could that hinder it, from a legal planning policy framework?
Thank you. This cropped up at the last meeting, actually. So, yes, I'm looking at the photographs of them now. The first notice was displayed. It was removed. We were either told or noticed, so we put up a second one. And the legislation is clear, although there will be a slight gap of 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 or 5 days between being told of the disappearance of one and the new one going up. We need to have them up in total for 21 days from start to finish, which we've clearly complied with. So, yeah.
I actually questioned this on the site visit. I said to the officer, there seems to be no site notice, so they put a new one out. So,
Councillor Mason.
One of the representations is one I've never seen before, which is ceiling heights being inaccurate, contrary to the HMO SPD. Is this the case?
Thank you, Councillor. No, we're happy with the plans as submitted and their correctness and the compliance with the 1.5 metre ceiling height and room sizes. Then we get onto the slightly more complex licensing standard.
Simon, I'm just slightly worried. I'm hoping that most of the ceilings are higher than 1.5 metres, otherwise everybody has to crouch.
That's correct. So it complies with the the measurement of the floor areas in the report are for all ceiling heights above 1.5 metres. And you only get a small area around about 1.5, 1.6 at the sloping part of the roof. And there's area below that, which is additional area, which rather than boxing it off and putting it into the attic, you keep it as extra space, inverted commas, above and beyond the measured amount. The further point is about the 2.3 metre height is a licensing standard that you're supposed to have 75% of a bedroom's floor space. Members may recall that last autumn it cropped up in one particular meeting, and this is only the time it's come back since then. As we've set here, it's rarely met. Again, because the complexities of trying to meet it, you can artificially meet it by reducing the floor space, boxing off more, and that means more of the area is above 2.3 metres, but you're then boxing off space that you could use. So that's why licensing, I'm informed by licensing, rarely have a difficulty with it. And it seems eminently sensible. It is a criteria that they have at their disposal should they wish, but it's sensibly they normally accept that some proposals don't meet it because they're providing a bigger room. So it's a bit complex, but it's entirely sensible and acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Smythe.
This is something that crops up, Chair, in a number of these reports. 9 objections, including from Councillor Swan, have been received. That's on paragraph 7.1. 3 of these were provided without the postal address of the objectors. I noticed that most times there are objections without the postal addresses of the objectors. Does that mean we're getting people from Australia writing in support of their cousin's planning application or to refuse a neighbour's concern? I think I'd like some clarity about this. I mean, most places have a rule that they won't accept comments if there isn't a postal address attached.
Yes, so we recently updated our advice on the website for giving our reasons as to why we request people's addresses. We do make clear on the website that if you don't provide an address, we will still take the comments into account if they're material planning reasons. But we do also make clear that if we don't know where the nature of your comments and your experience comes from, we may attach lesser weight because in effect, if your concern is about parking in the area and we don't know if you live adjacent to the property, we can't understand how much direct experience you would have of that. But fundamentally, we only discount fully anonymous, so no name, no address. If someone provides their name, we will take their comments into account, but we may attach a lesser weight if we don't know where they live, Chair.
And would that count towards the 6 objections?
No, specifically not. And that's one of the reasons why we put that clarity in. So we do need the addresses and we need separate addresses so we avoid the issue of multiple comments just from a single address.
Thank you.
If we discount Councillor Swan, there were only 5 objections with addresses.
But I don't think we can can't remove Councillor Swan. He's one of the local ward councillors.
I'm not ruling him out, but he isn't a neighbour necessarily.
Yeah. But he is a local ward councillor.
Could I have a comment on that, please?
David?
We would know where Councillor Swan lives, so we would, from his address details, so I don't think we would discount.
Planning committee on its own anyway, wouldn't it?
Yes. So he has that call-in power. Yes, absolutely.
That's. I think it ought to be a bit more clearly distinguished in the future. And I'm not sure. I think it's a good idea to accept, or at least not even to try to get an address from people. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, colleagues? Councillor Cantlish. I'm just trying to anticipate and hope you don't feel left out.
This time I actually hadn't put my
Excellent.
light
All right.
on.
So.
But now that you have, I will take the opportunity to say a couple of things. Are we on questions or comments yet?
We're on questions, which go first. Okay. Comments. Councillor Candlish.
Thank you, Chair, for recognising me so swiftly. I think there's a few things. I've just found a question I should have asked in the previous section, having tried to be clever. Never mind. I've missed it. I'll get it another time. I think it's worth saying on this one that actually it is quite nice to hear the landlord come and speak in person and to set out a positive vision about what they're trying to do with the property. I know that the whole idea of an HMO is unpopular with many people, which is why I think Councillor Smythe's comments about actually making sure we're getting comments from local people in particular areas who actually understand the specifics is important, because otherwise I'm certainly seeing a rise of vexatious comments for people who object to the principle of something, be it parking, be it HMOs, be it almost anything, and the internet allows people to do that from almost any range. I was also, as someone who likes the environmental agenda, very pleased to hear that there were considerations about things like putting in, at this point in time, the air source heat pumps, and I assume insulation and other energy efficiency measures, because in the long run, we're all going to be forced to do this. You can see the way the world is moving. And secondly, even in the short run, this is the fastest way, often, that we can deliver lower energy bills to the people who actually go on to live in these places. And since this is often a group of people who are otherwise relatively low income, because mostly that if you have the money, you would actually like to go and have your own private property, this is also a good way of tackling issues like fuel poverty. And it is the incremental effect of the changes like the ones that we are hearing about in this property today that will actually make that difference and give everyone the warm, decent homes that actually we all on the committee would like to see people getting. We all know also that we are not there yet, so this is one that I think is ahead of the game, and I certainly will be proposing to accept the recommendation to accept.
Okay. Was that a proposal, Councillor Cantlish? Thank you. Councillor Smythe. Okay, Councillor Vallely. So you want to third it? Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Ashmore.
I wasn't going to comment, but I thought I'd better. I was about to say, you know, the committee, as a committee, we shouldn't be, you know, either anti-HMO or pro-HMO. We have to deal with them all on their merits. And looking at the objections, not just to this one, but as ward councillors, we all see what people say, whether emailing us, phoning us, what their main field is about HMOs, and that's influenced whether they object to it or not. Most of them are to do with, you know, overcrowding in the area or changing the landscape of the area on this one. And this one is a fresh one. There's not any in that 50-metre radius. So this one really is, there's no danger of it being too many HMOs in that area there. And yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Candace said about the really positive deputation there from the applicant, you know, setting out a positive and encouraging view there. And if more HMOs, you know, the way the economy's going, the cost of living crisis is going, people are going to need somewhere to stay that's affordable, and HMOs do help reach that need. I think this one is very beneficial there, especially with the environmental credentials. I think, you know, I'm happy to see this one actually give a chance.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you can't come back. No, sorry. This part of the discussion is purely for the committee. Sorry, just... Okay, any other comments? No, okay. We have one proposal on the table. Any other proposals people wish to make? Okay, the proposal is from Councillor Cantlish, seconded by Councillor Smythe, to give planning permission. Can I see those in favour? Please show. And those against, please show. Okay, so planning permission is granted.
As owners of these properties, you know, and I watch all committees, you know, I would like to say to the community and stuff, you know, as someone that builds these, you know, I see all the comments on parking and stuff, you know, so now I can't build a multi-storey car park in the garden, you know, I can't reinvent the wheel with issues like that, but we can, you know, people often want bigger room sizes, councillors often like to see utility rooms, like proper HMO developers such ourselves, you know, we've done this for 60 years, that really care should be, taking on these criticisms from local communities and really integrating what we can into our designs. And I really feel like that's what we're doing. So thank you very much for the verdict anyhow.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to 15 Hayling Avenue. Page 17, colleagues. Simon, is this yourself?
Yep. Just getting organised, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. 15 Hayling Avenue. This is an application for the change of use from a Class C3 dwelling house to purposes falling within Class C3 or Class C4. That means it would be, if granted, a flexible consent allowing the owner to move between C3 and C4 should they wish during the 10-year period of the consent. This application has come in because of a call in from Councillor Sanders.
Can I ask a question, Chair? Sorry. Are there any deputations on this?
Yes, as on the list of
Mrs. Bundy has been sat in a wheelchair.
Yep, we're just going to go through these in order. So Mrs. Bundy is next on the list, Councillor Hunt. So let's keep on going and see if we can get through these. Simon, back to you.
I think we have Mr. Golage here to speak to the application and Councillor Kadir as well, in due course. Right, so we're in Baffin's ward. Hayling Avenue is one of those east-west roads that runs between Baffin's Road and Eastern Road. There's a typo in the report, paragraph 2.2. We've just cleared that up in the supplementary matters report. So it's a mid-terrace there. To the south, could you just go back one, please, Dave? To the south, there's Lindisfarne Court, which is a fairly modern block of, I think, 3 stories, 9 flats. And to the southeast, diagonally across, you've got St Cuthbert's Church, which has other facilities like the Children's Centre and surgery you can see mentioned there, just for completeness. Otherwise, it's a predominantly residential area, and that is a terraced house. Thank you, David. There we are, outlined in red. Next paragraph. So this is looking west. The top photograph is looking west. So the house is under the word opposite. Under the E of opposite on the right-hand side, thank you. So those are the flats opposite to the left, to the south. They're the 3-story Lindisfarne Court. And then the lower photograph shows the church diagonally opposite as well, just to give you some context. Next photograph. So with respect to the mixed and balanced communities, we have on that plan, we have 2 HMOs, which are the larger purple triangles you can see on the left-hand side there. That's fronting Milton Road. Its rear garden just is clipped by the 50-metre radius. And then on the southwest side, there was another property also in the 50-metre radius. And then 79 St Piran's Road is just to the north of the property. That didn't pop up on the plan, unfortunately, but we have it in the report. And then since publication, we've noticed 2 more houses, not HMOs, but 2 more residential properties. So again, on Milton Road, on the western side there, you've got the large triangle. There at 63 and 67A, there are 2 more residential properties that just have their rear boundaries clipping within the 50-metre radius. So actually there are 57 properties, not the 55 in the report. So if approved, there would be 4 HMOs giving a percentage of 7.02, so below the threshold guidance in the SPD. Then moving on to the property, very little intervention is proposed. I think the only change, if you look at the bathroom, they're simply moving the door from the existing place out into the corridor to make the room big enough. That's somewhat arbitrary. I don't think the applicant would argue with that. to make it above the 3.74, so it becomes 3.88. How usable is that little bit of space into the bathroom? You could perhaps have a towel rail there or some hooks on the wall to hang some clothing or something like that. Or you could just convert the bath into a shower, in which case the room would comply with the size standards. But that is the only intervention in the property that was discussed by officers with the applicant. You've got 3 bedrooms upstairs. The largest one is bedroom 1, which is big enough for double occupancy. As the report sets out, a C4 use class confers up to 6 people living together, but because there is just the one bathroom in the property, any more than that would not comply with the SPT guidance. So we've got a limit in occupancy condition to 4 persons set out at the back of the report. But otherwise, the individual lounge, kitchen and dining all exceed the minimum space standards, as do the bedrooms. So we are happy with that. And I've covered the 3 matters already in the SMAT, so that is how we're able to recommend the application positively. I think we've got some photographs. There we are, no change to elevations. And then flicking through the rooms, these will all remain as existing apart from the bathroom. As the bathrooms are standing in the doorway, so the room will be extended behind the person taking the photograph there, basically just to make that minor adjustment. But there are the other rooms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you much indeed. We have 2 deputation requests, Mr. Gollidge and Councillor Kadir. So, Mr. Gollidge, welcome. You're first, and thank you very much for coming today. You
Good morning.
have 6 minutes.
All you councillors that sit in these meetings, how many of you actually go and see what you are accepting and proposing? I live at number 31, Hayling Avenue. I do know that the drainage from the WCs, etc., are inadequate for the infrastructure that we have within this town. There is only a 4-inch drainage system in the front, which runs from number 33 right the way down to number, I think is 15 on St. Byron's Junction. And there is a 4-inch runs at the back of the property. They often get fouled up with, let's just say, other things being put into the drainage system. It doesn't bode well when you say, oh, we'll have an HMO here or an HMO there, without looking at the infrastructure that is required for the disposal of the waste that is created by all of us. When I heard of the proposal for this, I know people have to be able to live somewhere, but you do need to look at the infrastructure that is around this city. As a planning controller, none of you, and I say this advisedly, none of you actually go and look at what is being proposed in these places. You need to. Hayling Avenue is like a speedway in the mornings and afternoons when the 3 schools in the area are coming in or going out. You cannot move. Now, I know you're not interested in vehicles in this town, and you're trying to get rid of them. But I would ask you to consider, I'm disabled. I cannot walk anywhere. And yet I have people parking over my disabled bay. I have people parking in the middle of the road even. It gets beyond a joke when nobody, but nobody, listens to the people that are actually living there. You need to open your ears. Don't sit in ivory palaces. I worked for 55 years in the construction industry, and I can tell you from experience, builders are not interested in what you think. All they're interested is the pounds, shillings and pence that goes into their pockets week by week. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Kadir.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak today. And I echo with some of the comments Mr. Gorgeous has made. But as you have a guideline and you have a responsibility. But let me speak today. Councillor Sanders cannot make it, so he has asked me to deputise. Firstly, I wish to point out some factual errors in the report. Paragraph 2.1 mentioned traffic measures in Langston Road, with the last proposed HMO iSpokes exist. This one is in Hailing Avenue. Although there are no speed bumps, speeding is such that we as a councillor got extra 20-mile-an-hour signs put in last year. Secondly, the percentage effects any HMO here would have differs in paragraph 8.6 and 8.17, which is right. I know the Councillor Sanders has 3 areas of concern based on the plans people saw. The change our action has forced on the developers are welcome. I want members to back restriction any HMOs here to 4 occupants and not the 6 the developer wants, which he said, and welcome the increase in the bathroom size. We would ask for 2 more things to be changed. First, we would want the number of occupants restricted to 4 for C3 and C for 4 use. This would minimize the impact on local infrastructure. That understandably upset local people. It also cuts bureaucracy, as the developer would not have to tell the council when this is a HMO or not. It does mean changing the information of the reports to 4 people, not 6. Second, any advertising should be for 4 people alone, with enforcement action starting immediately. If that is not the case, I am told there have been applications where the advertising number of occupants differs from what committee approved. This reduces still further the trust the local people have for HMO developers, and it must stop. The other 2 reasons overlap. We have reported that antisocial behavior in 6.3 to the police. This is the only one of our concern that does not get reply in the report. Given that I want the developers today to say these tenants have been or will be kicked out, and that as other HMO developers in this area have promised, new residents will be professional, such as the nurses and QA. This will reduce the capacity for conflict. This behavior has clearly had an impact on our residential amenity or neighbors, and then has led to the desire for good soundproofing. We support that they wants it added as a condition. This third part of this construction, sadly, I know the low stop, this being a reason to refuse permission. However, it does impact heavily on local residents. We know other HMOs nearby. The one at 79 St. Parents is a good one, where construction has caused significant disturbance for our local people. An enforcement notice from the council. We ask for a proper construction management plan, with neighbors having dedicated person, phone lines, and email contact when problems happen alongside hours and restriction to construction. The developer says this work is minimal. We know that has not always been the case when work starts, so this again will help reduce conflict. So we ask you to refuse this HMO. If you will not, we ask you to back with the condition we have said. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kadir. Okay, colleagues, questions? Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from those deputations there, and they're very useful, obviously, because we need to hear local input from people that live there. It helps us make decisions. But my question on that is, and I'm sure it's been answered many times in the committee, but I think for people to get a general understanding of it, with the restrictions that Councillor Kadir's mentioned there, are we as a committee entitled to place restrictions on planning applications in this committee, and how enforceable are that? In this case, from 6 to 4, was it?
In general terms, yes, and then it depends on the merits of each particular matter. In this case, yes, we've already explained that because of the single bathroom, the standard should be for 4 occupiers, not the 6 that otherwise a C4 consent would confer. So we've got a condition attached to say no more than 4.
Okay. Councillor Smythe?
Just to clarify, that condition, or even a numbers condition, couldn't be put on it if it was used, as is also proposed in this, as a family dwelling. Is that right?
Oh, thank you. And that is only one in C4 use. Thank you. I should have made that clear, because I think Councillor Kadir mentioned that. It's in the condition, yeah. So this property, as occupied by a Class C3 family dwelling house, you could have 1 person in it, you could have 6 people in it, but there's no restriction on that. But for C4 use, we have proposed that limitation.
Thank you. I just thought it was worth clarifying that, as it wasn't quite clear from the submission. Can I ask another question? We don't normally put on considerate building requirements. It's sort of given that that will be the case. Could the officers make any comment on that? I mean, it is a nuisance to live next door to something that's been converted. We've lived very close to a house that's been in conversion actually for about 3 or 4 years, and it is noisy and dusty sometimes, but it's a short time. What's the normal, what do building regulations do about this? I know it's beyond our remit, but it's to do with satisfying residents that can be managed.
Thank you. The internal works will vary from HMO to HMO. We see a lot where the internal of the property is significantly gutted and rebuilt. New stairs, new floor ceilings in some places to the upper floor, and walls taken down and so on. That, of course, is very significant and will be very noisy and for a longer period of time. But that's not controlled by planning legislation. That will be controlled by environmental legislation in terms of working hours in particular. And, of course, any owner of a C3 dwelling house could do the same works to their property should they wish, or significant works, extensions, remodelling, etc. In the case of this particular HMO, just the extension to the moving of the door in the bathroom, that is the only piece of physical work proposed.
Very much. Thank you very much. I was actually down on Hayling Avenue and did have a quick look from outside yesterday when I was visiting a friend nearby, just to say.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Simon, Mr. Gollis brought up the issue of sewage, which I think is important. My memory is that when we turned a HMO application down on the issue of sewage, where there were specific references to times of regular breakdowns in the sewage system and spillages onto the road, when the planning inspector looked at it, they said that that was nothing to do with us and we should not be taking that into account in terms of planning, and overruled us. Is my memory correct?
That's right, Chairman. Yes, we set it out 8:30 in the report. The inspector made clear that it's the statutory undertaker's responsibility to make sure whether or not you've got a change of use or new property. For existing sewerage, it's their responsibility to make sure that the sewage system works effectively. So I appreciate the problems Mr. Gollage has referred to. In this instance, the property, if granted planning consent, could be used as either continued in a Class 3 dwelling house use by a family or one person, or it could be a C4 small HMO for up to 4 people, and the owner could flip between those without the need for planning permission over the 10-year period. Of course, as a C3 dwelling house, you could have young children there, nappies, etc. You could have more than 4 residents. As an HMO use, as it happens in this instance, unlikely to have any nappies going on, and just the 4 residents. So I would hope the situation, Mr. Gollage, wouldn't get any worse for you at all with this particular use.
And so, just so translate local government speak into English, the statutory undertaking, that means Southern Water, is that right?
Correct.
Nasty people who've just put our bills up. Although that shouldn't affect our decision, should it? Councillor North.
Thank you. Just for clarification, on the paperwork we've got in front of us, obviously with all the little dots of the properties, there's 39 dots, 39 properties. Are flats included in this, and is each individual flat counted as a separate property?
Yes, Councillor. So the 9 flats I pointed out at Lindisfarne Court to the south, there were 9, and although you can only see 1 dot, 9 premises are included in the total count.
Thank you.
Councillor Candlish.
So, as Cabinet Member for Transport, I should declare something of an interest in the response I give now. But first of all, I'd like to address the query that was raised about if we have been to each and every site that we are asked to rule upon. And I'm afraid the answer is no, it's just not practical. There is not the time to go to each individual one, and therefore we have to rely on the reports that we have got. But I would say that we do try to be understanding of the reality on the ground for people, and I often bring up the reality that I have, which is my daughter lives in an HMO in Bristol, and I only wish that she had some of the protections that are in place in Portsmouth, because her standard of accommodation is nowhere close to this. I also heard concerns about parking, which are often raised at these matters. And it is unfortunate that the standard assumption is the 1.5 cars, and I absolutely recognise that parking is under huge pressure across much of the city. Much of the south is already in residential parking zones. Much of the top of Portsea Island is under severe pressure, even though they have not yet chosen to go down that route. In terms of disabled bay parking, I think it is dreadful that people are parking in your disabled space. And I only hope that the enforcement officers come round and find the people who are doing that. In terms of the things here, we've spoken about the construction management plan. I think that is something that is worthy of thought. There was also a point in 16.3 about the fact that the existing tenants were reported as, and I think the report seems to suggest accepted as causing some issues. I don't think there are any restrictions that this committee can put on about the type of person or people that go into any place. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Peter, are you finished? Okay, colleagues, any other questions? Councillor Adair.
Just a general one. I see it's a change of use for purposes falling within multiple occupation, Class C4, or a dwelling house. If it remained as a dwelling house, quite manifestly a dwelling house, and another application was put in within the 50-metre rule, if that was a dwelling house, would it still count for the 10%?
Yes, because they've got the flexibility across the 10 years to change between the two, we'd always assume the worst, inverted commas, and always count it as a C4.
Okay. Okay. Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? No? Okay, comments and proposals. Councillor Mason.
This strikes me as a very modest change of use. It's restricted to 4 people. It may well therefore be fewer people than you would have with a family. and so the demands may well be less than you would have with a family with older children living or young adults living at home. It strikes me as quite modest. It seems to be well thought out. And there is the flexibility to move between the two classes. So I would recommend propose the officer's recommendation.
Can I ask Councillor Mason, would you accept a condition to limit this to 4 people, which we've been told by the planning officer? Is it already in as a condition? Okay, sorry, my apology. Okay, is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Vallely? Are there any other proposals? Okay, no other proposal. Can I see those in favour of granting planning permission, please show. And those against, please show. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Planning permission is granted. Let's move on to 36 Chichester Road. And David, is this you again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an application at 36 Chichester Road for the change of use of the property from current Class C3 dwelling house to a 7-bed, 7-person house in multiple occupation. So this is the property here on the right-hand side, mid-terrace property with north-facing and south-facing garden and a reasonably lengthy garden for the area, very typical of the surrounding properties. So as you can see the property there, understand that the adjacent building on the right-hand side is a children's nursery. In terms of the HMO count, so currently there are 3 HMOs identified there in the north side of the road, and so with the additional property as a HMO, that would bring the overall figures to 4 out of 43, so 9.3%, so still below the 10%, so still not over the 10%, and therefore compliant with your policy and guidance. So there's a series of alterations made to the property to accommodate the HMO use. This is the existing elevations. And then the existing layout, which is fairly typical for these properties, 3-bed existing property. So the scheme will be extended with a loft conversion and extension and a rear ground floor extension shown there. In terms of what that means to your to the internal layout, this fairly typical layout that we see. So 2 ground floor rooms with en suites, and then the communal living kitchen space to the rear, which is extended, which you can see to the north there. Up at first floor, 3 bedrooms, again all en suite, and then in the loft space, further 2 bedrooms, again en suite and with an additional bathroom shown there. Just to highlight, in the updates, the lantern was added to the rear extension. Just some photographs of the site. So this is looking down the garden. Top left, you can see the existing property with its rear wing coming out, adjoining onto the property to the east, and then some photos of the internal layout as currently. Chair, in the update, you'll see that the applicant has completed the habitats mitigation, and so we can remove the final part of the recommendation, part 3 of the recommendations, because the agreement is already completed, and we've secured those that mitigation, and also there are just tweaked, obviously, to the plans list to accommodate the change to introduce the lantern there. So we're at the next revision B on the plan list, and then also just amendments to the water efficiency condition to ensure it's enforceable. with those changes to the SWAT, we recommend the application for approval, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Okay, Dr. Bundy, Mrs. Bundy, the floor is yours. I'm sorry we've taken time to get to you.
Lovely, no worries. So I wanted to start looking at this document for the committee meeting today, and I wanted to look at 8.12, the standard of internal accommodation. And it states, or it says that the council's adopted space standards are adhered to, and that's good. But then it says, oh, except for the size of the communal space. And it seems that that doesn't meet the council's communal space standards. So it's quite clear on that basis it doesn't meet your council standards. It then kind of seems to, and this is from kind of a public perspective, go to a different standard, and because the first one it didn't agree with, it chooses the HMO smaller space standards, and I'm not sure why people in an HMO should have lower standards than those in the general community. But anyway, it says okay, let's see whether this compares favourably with the lower HMO standards, and I don't think it does. I mean, bedroom 4 I measure as below 10 metres squared. Here it says it's just 10 metres squared. And if you look at bedroom 6, that's 10.1. So have we all got a handle of how much bigger this is than the minimum lower standards? It really is just the size of A4, and I couldn't stand one leg on that sheet of A4. So I don't think this is very generous, and I don't think it's meeting the standards that the council set out for HMOs. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the density, the area density, 8.5. Now, apparently there's 43 properties in this 50-metre radius, and I'd already say that it's dense enough. If you look at it, we've got a child's nursery directly next door to the suggested HMO. We've got a double glazing factory. We've got 6, probably more flats, and 4 HMOs already in this 50-metre radius. And I will emphasise that that's 4 HMOs, not the 3 that has been suggested by the planning people. 52 Chichester Road has been an HMO for years. Whether it's licensed or unlicensed, it's still an HMO. And I can't see how we can sit here today at committee with inaccurate information. And I do believe that the licensing team are investigating 52 regards its use as an HMO. But it already exists. And that means our density is 9.3. And if we include 36 Chichester Road, that takes the count to 5 properties, 5 HMOs in 43. So I've got my calculator with me. And if I do 5 divided by 43, I get 11.6. So this proposal takes us above the recommended 10% rule of PCS 20. So finally, impact on neighbours. Well, parking. I know we talk about parking endlessly. There isn't any, so it kind of makes this simple. I'm pleased that the document 8.22 at least acknowledges us that the proposal will increase parking. But then it kind of says, well, there isn't any parking, so let's ignore it. If we look at 5.2, the highways team, it says it won't affect the function of the road, except for people hunting for spaces. I've got some photos with me, and I'm not sure whether I can pass them round or not, or whether you can pan on me. Oh, I'm up there, I can see. I've got my
You
glass
can,
on.
but we don't give them back.
Yep, okay, shall I pass them over?
Do carry on, Mr. Bundy.
Okay, so what the photos are kind of basically showing is that one chap's been hunting for a parking spot. I like this expression, hunting. And he's decided to park on the pavement, which is really all he could do. There's also a white car in the picture, which is parked on yellow lines. And these are long-term parkers overnight, during the morning. Okay, so it's having an impact already. So I don't really see how this proposal is going to help the situation. And you may say, well, that's not a planning issue. It is a safety issue. There is a nursery on the corner, and the yellow lines are continuously taken. So there is a safety in moving across the road issue that this proposal is not going to help. Now, 36 Chichester Road was built as a 3-bedroom family home. It was never designed to be a block of flats. Let's consider the noise transmission through solid Victorian walls, with no remediation to stop this. And let's be clear that this proposal is to demolish 36, keeping little more than the front and the rear elevations. How are we supposed to care for mum in a building site that could go on for months and months and months? Now, I hear you saying in your mind, well, it's not a planning issue. But it is under the amenity to neighbouring residents. So I believe it is a planning issue. And then finally, 8.18, a classic statement. The impact of 7 unrelated people in an HMO is no different to a family. This statement could have only been written, and I'm looking at the planners over there, by someone who has never lived next door to one. When 36 was last an HMO, there was constant interventions by the police. There were thefts, there was antisocial behaviour, until the finale, 36, was totally gutted by fire. So we've been here before, so please accept that HMOs detrimentally impact neighbours. So really, to recap, the details in this report are grossly inaccurate. And I noticed we turned up today to see that a roof light has now been added to the communal space. Again, an example of planning creep, which we're seeing time and time again. And those were our objections to the extension in the first place.
Andy, could you bring your comments to a close?
Yep.
We're running out of time.
Okay. I'm kind of speaking for Mum as well, who was going to talk in her 6 minutes, but she's decided to. Okay, Mum, it's okay. Don't feel it. It's okay. Shh, shh, shh. So, just to summarise, this takes us to over 10%, to 11.6%, and contravenes the PCS20. You can't make planning decisions unless you've got the correct data, and we haven't. The proposal does not meet the Council's minimum communal space standards, and the Council does not meet the lower space standards for HMOs. So on that basis, this proposal should be thrown out.
Thank you very much
for your time.
Councillor Hunt, welcome.
Thanks, Chair. I'm pleased to follow on from Dr. Bundy. May I tell you that about 4 rotations ago, you considered a HMO near here, and Dr. Bundy is quite correct. Everybody was sold this thing, and now the neighbours next door who had a quiet life have got the police calling on their house all the time, on the next door. There's been a death probably through drugs, people climbing in and out and falling out of windows. So yes, they can have an adverse impact on residential amenities. That's the first point, Doctor, I want to reinforce that Dr. Bundy has given. I'd like to say to you, no more HMOs for the time being. And I say this because I've had another one come in on my phone just now of a person who has rented out and gone abroad and now is being asked questions by the council about that property. The reason I'm saying is because we are successfully looking at a number of HMOs all across the city, which would, if they were considered today, be having an impact on the way you make a decision. So Mr. Bundy informed me, Dr. Bundy informed me, that he's spoken to the people at 52, that they have told him, one of them has told him that he rents a room there, and that multiple people go out. So I don't want you, respectfully, I don't want you to decide today. I've written into the enforcement team, asking them to go and look at 52 Chichester Road to see what's going on there. What I would point out to you is if you think about this very carefully, and if you look at the 50-metre rule there, that if 52 say it is, for argument's sake, is an HMO, then this one today would or should be refused. And people will say, oh, well, it's first come, first served. Fair enough. But then, if subsequently 52 is looked at and found it has to put in an HMO application, so the diameter of the radius moves to the right, it would probably get it looking at the HMO database that's on publicly available. It would probably get it. But what it does mean that if it were an HMO today and it were registered, that Mrs. Bunday would not be having this application go through today. That's how it is. So they are being disadvantaged because other people have sought to behave in a criminal way, possibly by running an illegal HMO. And we've got to get a grip of this, and I think it's quite wrong that we've seen an example already today, and this one that's come in on my phone already, is to say the council is, despite anybody jumping on this quick, saying, oh, crikey, it's all terribly wrong, the council is getting to grips with it. We are investigating these, but there are quite a few. And people are being caught and people are being fined. But it means that your reports aren't really accurate. And there is a balance between reflecting what's going on in the report and the ability of the City Council to prosecute these people who are breaking the law. In other words, not giving things away. Because we are going around and getting them, and you've seen that in the newspapers too. I would say too that this is going to be cramped and overcrowded accommodation for future intended residential occupiers. So that if you decide that you won't defer it, and I hope that you will, so that you at least get a report back, you might not change your views, but you at least get a report back that is based on more complete evidence. And who knows how many others there might be that are being looked at. So I think every report needs to carry a paragraph that is informed at least by Claire Hardwick and her team around enforcement of licensing of HMOs, so you can be reassured that you are considering everything when it comes to you and that you have got the best evidence available to you. I think the 10% rule, it must be protected. Its integrity is important, as you've stressed earlier on, Chair. We can't have the 10% rule, or is it the 11% rule, or the 12% rule, or the 13% rule, or the 14% rule, or the 15% rule. Because later on, planners will come back and say, oh, this one's been going for ever such a long time, therefore we've got to give it its, because it's got established use, we've got to look at it, and all sorts of other things will come along. It isn't entirely their fault, of course. It is the fact that people unscrupulously do this. They breach the rules, and they don't submit for a request for planning for an HMO licence and to HMO planning. So I've just had another one come on. It's a person who's gone abroad, rented it to a number of students, and now is panicking because the officers are onto him, and so presumably that will be resolved. So I think I've made my view known, Chair. I suspect you and all of you have a lot of sympathy with it, and with Mr. Bundy. I hope that you'll refuse the application for the reasons he described, and that we will look.
If we could.
Thank you. And we'll look very closely at the reports and how we take them and try to include more information. Thank you for your tolerance, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, if it's possible to keep the time, it is always good. Okay, colleagues, Carrie-Anne, you are not on the list. Okay, David, and between yourselves and Democratic Studies, could you find out why Carrie-Anne's requests for deputations have not appeared on the list? Because it's becoming slightly too much of a habit on our committee meetings. Carrie-Anne.
I wanted to pick up on a couple of the comments of the neighbour and also Councillor Hunt. I want to assure the neighbour that the bedrooms are carefully constructed to achieve correct sizes, and they are strictly controlled by licenses. So they do come out and they do measure them post-build. Also, that the walls are upgraded to comply with the new building regs, which will provide you a far greater reduced noise transmission than the current arrangement. So that should help in terms of going forward. I also want to say we cannot include unlawful HMOs in the density. These properties are often at a really poor standard, and in my opinion should be enforced against and closed down, not rewarded by allowing them to be included in the data count. The previous unlawful HMO, which was clearly not managed correctly, is just a prime example of that, and those landlords should not be rewarded for that. The landlords that do the right thing and are upgrading these properties and managing the properties well are the ones that should be rewarded for doing the correct thing. As a company who also manage these properties, we never struggle to fill a completed HMO once it's available for letting. This just goes to show that well-designed HMOs that offer an excellent standard of living are still in demand and offer an all-bills included option for independent living for those who cannot currently afford to get on the property ladder. HMOs do play an important contribution to the housing stock in providing mixed and balanced communities, and those that aren't run correctly should be closed down and enforced against. I see lots of objections for HMOs in Portsmouth, and again I have to stress that Portsmouth space standards demand some of the largest spaces for the tenants than most other areas of the UK. As we design HMOs in areas all over the UK, by using the Portsmouth space standards as a guide, this in turn is also driving up standards elsewhere. In fact, we're doing a couple in Bristol at the moment, Councillor Cavendish should be pleased to know, and we're using Portsmouth standards as a guide. So hopefully that will strive to make developers up there follow these guidelines. I also wanted to add that many of our clients had energy-saving features as well, and we've done a green roof recently and heat pumps. With 36 Chichester Road specifically, all 7 bedrooms are proposed to meet or exceed the 10 square metres, and all benefit from ensuite facilities. David pointed out there was an additional bathroom on the top floor. That's actually just an additional WC just for visitors, people that may be working at the property, and to house tanks to ensure constant hot water. The communal area provides 26.4 of fully usable communal area, which exceeds the 22.5 square metre requirement, and additional light is provided into space with a large roof lantern. The property will be finished to a high specification. Our client is keen to offer tenants high-end accommodation. The property will be professionally managed, and any issues if they arise will be dealt with promptly. I ask that you agree with the Planning Officer's recommendation for approval today for an application that is fully compliant with policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so various questions, David, have been brought up. I think one of the important bits out of this is about the space size of rooms. In terms of things being listed as 10 metres, how can we be certain that they are 10 metres square?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as we record in the reports, whilst there may be a stated room size on the plans, we double check these, and this is why we've got a list of all of those as measured sizes in the report. There appeared to be a little bit of confusion about how the policy standard is applied. So yes, it is clear in the HMO SPD that it relates over to the licensing SPD in relation to communal space. So where all the rooms are 10 square metres, as in this case, the standard is for 22.5 metres squared for communal living and dining space, and you'll see we're above that at, I believe, 26.
And my understanding of the reason for that policy is that the minimum size of a bedroom is 6.51, and if you've got small bedrooms like that, then the space standard says you have to have a bigger communal space, but that if you have bigger bedrooms where people can spend time, then the requirement for communal space becomes smaller because they've got bigger rooms of their own. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr Bundy for giving such a very clear and concise deputation on his reasons for asking for refusal. it goes from parking Armageddon near a nursery with obviously safety implications. So we clearly have a lot of issues, but I think the main issue is the one raised by Dr. Bundy and Councillor Hunt, and that is that there's an HMO in existence at number 52. I think we need to have a look at this before we make a decision on this application, and I ask that we defer in order to examine number 52 to determine whether it is or is not an HMO.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yep, David.
If possible, it'd be helpful if we could respond. So this was raised with us fairly late on. Notwithstanding that, we've had an opportunity to investigate any possibility that the property may be a HMO. So there's no planning history of it being granted a HMO, and there's no evidence of it being licensed as a HMO. As we know, that's not necessarily the full test. Nonetheless, we've been able to investigate the sales records. So the property was last sold in 2017. At that point, it was clearly a single-family dwelling. The council tax records that we've also looked at support that. So, and it's also possible, just by looking on the web, to see the photos of the sale at the time, that it was clearly a three-bed family dwelling. It'd be very unusual. If anyone looks at the sales particulars at that time, very unusual for a HMO to have a child's bunk bed in the rooms, and its downstairs rooms used with sofas. So we're pretty satisfied that it was a family dwelling up until 2017. So in the event that the use did change at that point, it would be unlawful. There would need to be a HMO for more than 10 years to have become lawful. So we're pretty satisfied that the data you've got is correct, and you can make a decision today on the information that you have. And also, having checked the council tax records since 2017, again, we don't have any evidence of multi-occupancy since that date. So if the application is deferred, I'm afraid you're only going to be coming back with the same information in 3 weeks' time. So we're satisfied as we can be. You don't have a HMO there, and the mix and balance community data is correct, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have now two questions. Can I start by Councillor Smythe and then Councillor Ashmore?
Just to ask a question to follow up on that. If you did discover that it was an HMO, we would enforce against it and stop it being a HMO. Is that correct?
That's a starting point. Yes, so how it works is where there's a potential breach, the first step is to invite them to make an application to seek to regularise it, and then we consider that on its merits. If we were in a position whereby then that meant that that property in itself exceeded the 10%, or it was inadequate in its internal accommodation, and then again we would not be supported, but we'd need to deal with that on its merits, Chair.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you.
Just more of a statement wrapped in a question, really. But if you were running a covert, unlicensed HMO, you wouldn't expect to see evidence from like council tax and sales of the place. So just wondering, like, what else you've got to go on, really?
So it really works the other way, I'm afraid, Chair. If you want to refuse it because you think you're over the 10%, you actually need the evidence that that is a HMO. And so we would really need something more than we've got, which is simply an allegation. So if we go with the what we've got as evidence at the moment, I can expect us to fail, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's any doubt that there are unlicensed HMOs in Portsmouth, and I think they do need to be investigated. We were speaking earlier about how the radiuses can change depending on literally a matter of 3 or 4 doors. So this could impact, and I therefore I'm going to second Councillor Adair's proposal.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Councillor Candlish.
Chair, could I just have explained to me...
And Councillor, do you think you could get your microphone to point towards you as opposed to Councillor Vallely?
Okay, kind of don't like it pointing at me. Could an officer please just explain the 10-year rule and its implication, and its and how it relates to whether you can subsequently retrospectively apply.
Yes, so going back to first principles, so outside of, in many other local authorities, you do not need planning permission to change from a C3 to C4 HMO.
Can you just describe what a C3 is in
So a
English
C3
and a C4
okay.
is in English?
So C3 is just a normal dwelling house, and a C4 is a HMO for up to 6 people. If you travel to, if you go over the adjacent authorities, you'll find you can do that, change that without needing planning permission. Across the whole of City of Portsmouth, you need planning permission to do that because of what's called an Article 4 direction, which removes that particular right. Under planning law, you can, if you breach planning law for a sufficient length of time, in this case 10 years for a use, make that use lawful via the passage of time if it's not spotted or it's not enforced against by the council, or it may not actually be expedient for the council to enforce it either. So if a situation arises, please interrupt if I've lost anyone, if a situation arises where the use changes from C3, from a dwelling house to a small HMO, C4, that needs planning permission. And so that's a breach of planning control. But if that breach carries on for more than 10 years uninterrupted, it can become lawful via the passage of time. So that's why the sale date and our confidence that the property is a single dwelling house up to 2017 is important, Chair, because it could not have accrued those lawful use rights because we haven't got to the 10 years yet.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And just as it's been explained to me, most areas don't have the rule that you have to get planning permission to change to an HMO. We brought this in Portsmouth because we thought there was a particular problem. But it means that people who had HMOs beforehand didn't have to have planning permission, and if they just carried on, they haven't had to get planning permission. And therefore there are some of them that are historic, and they're not historic because people are being dodgy. They're just historic because we thought things needed tightening up. We brought in rules, but they had already been using their home as an HMO. So we have to get that balance between the people who already had been operating an HMO and had the right to do so, and people trying to break the rules. And we have to get to the people who are breaking the rules because they know what the rules are and they're trying to get around them. And that gives that balance, I hope. Councillor Adair, another question.
It's just supplementary. When I was in my last job, I very much hated people telling me how I should do my job, what I should do. But I was thinking this matter would be resolved very, very quickly, about 52. How about just knocking on the door or speaking ideally to neighbours either side? Because surely neighbours are going to know how many people are living there, whether it's a family, whether lots of strange people who clearly aren't related living there. I think the matter could be quite easily resolved just by knocking on that particular door, 52, or the houses either side.
So, Chair, it doesn't move you any further forward because all the evidence that we've got from council tax shows it to be a single dwelling house up until 2017, so it can't be lawful as a HMO. So even if it is, and there's no evidence that there is at the moment, it doesn't move us any further forward because it doesn't change the how we do that calculation on the 10%, Chair.
Okay, any more questions? Moving on to comments. I'm very reassured by the work that David has done to make sure that this, if this is an HMO, it can't claim retrospective thing that it can just turn into one. And it would, if it is running as an HMO, it would need to come back for planning permission, and it would breach the 10% thresholds. Therefore, it would fail, and it wouldn't be able to carry on. But we have had at the beginning of this meeting a point where we have failed and we didn't spot something coming through. So I think we are now in a position where we have to be seen to be being very cautious, and therefore I think it is worth the additional investigation, and therefore I would support looking at deferring this to make sure that, to see what the position is at number 52, because we have had a mistake and we've got to make sure that we are absolutely getting this right. So I would be happy to propose a deferral of this to investigate what's happening at number 52. I think Councillor Adair had already proposed that, and it's been seconded. So that would be my view. Is there another proposal? Okay, that's the one proposal. Are there any? Okay, I don't see any other proposal coming forward. Can I therefore see those in favour of a deferral, please
Chair,
show?
I was wanting a comment and you've gone straight to the proposal.
Sorry, my
so
apologies.
I don't know how to respond.
Councillor Candlish, do come in.
So, on the one hand, I am very sympathetic because I think the sooner we weed out and find the illegal, improper, not properly regulated ones which don't have the grandfathered rights, the better. And I would absolutely support not endorsing someone who had hidden their HMO status, because I think if you're a landlord in the city and you don't know that HMOs need to be regulated, you're kind of an unfit landlord already. I'm just a bit cautious that we are going to set the right standards for understanding why we're taking a decision to defer. If we were to take a decision to defer, the basis on which we were doing it, because I think there are stronger grounds perhaps here than in others, and I would not want simple vexatious comments that something is happening to be the basis for causing deferrals or what have you, because we'll just get ourselves into knots by doing that. However, this one has been identified by people locally, and a councillor has stood behind it to say there are reasonable grounds to suspect that this is the case. We don't know. I listened to Councillor Ashmore's comments about if you're running an HMO, the chances of you filling in your paperwork properly might be low, or you might do others. And I haven't heard from the officer something saying that there is evidence of a regular group of people paying in the property. So, in this instance, I would be willing to support deferral because I think there are sufficient grounds to make it worthwhile, but I think we have to set a very high benchmark, and outside of this, think about what the criteria are for subsequent ones to go in. Otherwise, this committee is going to spend even longer.
Yeah. But there is, we have made a mistake which we've looked at in the first application, and I think that therefore means we have to be particularly careful. Is there another proposal? Councillor Vallely.
I think that's not fair on the application that we're looking at. We're looking at, you know, another application down the road and punishing this one. I don't understand that.
Okay. So, Councillor Vallely, do you have a proposal?
So I'm going to propose that we pass this one.
Okay.
And I second that.
Okay. All right. We have two proposals. The first one that came in was proposed and seconded was for deferral to look at what's going on at number 52, and the second one was to grant planning permission as in the paperwork. So we're going to do them in order. So can I see those in favour of deferral, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, a late 5, 6. Those against, please show. 4, so that is carried. Therefore, by nature, the second proposition falls. So that's deferred so we can look at what's going on at number 52. Ladies and gentlemen, would you mind terribly if we had a 5-minute adjournment? Otherwise, there will be problems. So if we could be back by 1 o'clock by the Guildhall clock, 12 o'clock by this one, which hasn't been moved. Is that all right, colleagues? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are we ready to resume? Okay, so 22 Gladys Avenue. Are we broadcasting? We are, lovely.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is an application at 22 Gladys Avenue for its change of use from a see-through dwelling house to an 8-bed, 8-person HMO. So property is here's mid-terrace property on the southern end of Gladys Avenue near the junction with the London Road. You can see on the left-hand side a slightly unusual sort of angled plot that the property has, but actually a fairly sizable rear garden for the bearing in mind the surrounding properties. So this is property here, as I say, mid-terrace, and you just, if I don't avoid waggling it around, there's a passageway through on the right-hand side that allows access into the garden and the rear bike store without going through the property. So in terms of your 50-metre radius and the mix and balance communities, we've identified 2 HMOs within the 50-metre radius, so that would bring the total number to 3.57 if approved, which is well below your 10% limit in the SPD. And so existing floor plan, so the property will be altered and extended at the ground floor and in the loft. This is the current layout of the property. And so with the alterations to be undertaken, you can see how it's set out there. So we've got 2 ensuite rooms to the ground floor on the left-hand side with an extended rear wing, which will provide a communal living space. First floor, we have 4 bedrooms. Now you've got 2 ensuite, and then upstairs we've got 2 further bedrooms, but 3 separate bathrooms to serve the properties. So slightly atypical layout, but nonetheless compliant with your standards and guidance. So this is how the existing property works, and the alterations shown there. So you've got a rear dormer which provides the top floor space and roof lights to the front, and then at the ground floor the extension to the property there. As I said, there's space within the rear garden to provide bike store and outside space for the occupants. And again, they'd be able to access that bike store through the property to the right hand, sorry, without going through the property, I should say. Just some photos. You'll see, looking down the garden, there's a reasonable amount of outdoor space for occupants. Top right is the access through, so the property under renovation at the moment, and just some views out from the existing windows. So there are no updates from the supplementary matters, and looking at the scheme, Chair, it complies with our guidance and we are recommending it for approval to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Carrie Ann, on this occasion you are listed. And is that one you didn't? Is that you didn't want to speak on this one?
All of them. Thank you. As David said, this is a change of use from a C3 to an 8-person house of multiple occupation. All 8 bedrooms meet or exceed the 10 square metres and all benefit from their own bathroom. 6 by way of an ensuite, and the other 2 bedrooms have an access to their own larger bathrooms on the floor above. The required communal area in all bedrooms exceed 10 square metres, 22.5 square metres, and this property provides 25.53. We've provided additional light into the space with the addition of a roof lantern, and there's an additional WC at ground floor level for the comfort of the residents. The property also has the benefit of side access into the rear, which also may appeal to cyclists. I thought I'd bring up the rule of, I know you covered the 75% rule of 3 had a bit of discussion about that before. Just thought I'd explain a little bit about that, because I've spoken to a licensing officer about it recently, because when you've got the larger rooms, they don't technically comply. So it was brought in to basically protect those smaller rooms that are at the minimum standard at 7.5, that are wholly within the roof slope. So not a great standard of living at all, with very little amount of flat space of ceiling at 2.3. So when the bedrooms are larger and in excess of the 10 square metres, or I mean sometimes we've even got 14 square metres that don't apply to this rule, they do apply sort of common sense and assess the size and usability of the space. So I just wanted to bring that to the committee, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hunt.
All right. So I want to be clear about HMOs. They are providing more affordable, what's affordable nowadays, more affordable places for people to live. Some of the smaller rooms, some people don't have anywhere to live at all. And so these present an opportunity for people to find somewhere to live at a price that they can reasonably afford. And Kieran said to me earlier on, and I completely agree with her, that because her company does the right thing, sometimes it looks like that they get disadvantaged, or they feel disadvantaged because so many other people are doing the wrong thing. These rogue landlords who are operating without licenses, and there are a lot of them. But we are getting to grips with them. What I want to say about this is a very complex little area around Carmen Mews. It's very confused. There's little houses and flats and goodness knows what else behind. So I hope that if this does go through, that it will bring some regularisation of that particular area. The councillors at the front were right too, that, you know, there's a lot of investment that gets put in by these companies, bringing dilapidated housing back into use. But it's about the balance, as I think some of the councillors here on my left were saying. It's about the balance and getting things right. I've been up and down Gladys Avenue. People do not want any more HMOs. Unfortunately, the trade has brought itself into disrepute for all the reasons that we know about, and people like Kieran are facing an uphill struggle to get their applications through. Having said that, I represent people. Kieran represents her companies, and people don't want them, councillors. They really don't want them. So I'll ask you to throw this one out. It's already in a densely populated area. It adds more and more people to a neighbourhood that's already Dickensian in style in this little environment. It's very Dickensian in there. And I hope that you'll look very closely at the room standards or sizes and so on to make sure that they all are appropriate for what is intended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Questions? Councillor Cordy.
Thank you, Chair. I know we've been told about the soundproofing that goes into the sort of walls of these properties. I was wondering, does that impact the actual size of the wall? Does the soundproofing go into the wall, or does it go onto the wall?
David?
It's a technical matter for the building regulations stage, Chair. It would make a nominal difference to the overall floor area, I would expect.
Yeah, carry on, yes. Go, leap in.
So when we upgrade them to comply with building regs, they are slightly thicker than the normal walls, but that's reflected in the drawing. Sometimes our clients ask us to go above and extend on that even more, but again, that will be reflected in the drawing. So the wall type and makeup will be on the drawing of what's actually going to be in existence. But it's always upgraded than what it currently is to meet, I mean, I don't think it was building regs back then, so thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Smythe?
This is a small question about the WC bathrooms on the top floor, floor 2. Is there enough headroom there? Right, there are two little PEC lines that go across, and I wanted to know whether they were height lines and whether...
David?
In other words, I can see how somebody might sit down, but I can't see
And I think that's where the loos are.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's, you've answered the question there, Chair. So yes, we're satisfied in terms of the layout, and that it is under the kind of reef slope, but also it's where the toilet's sited, and you'll notice that the shower trays are indicated in the full head height areas.
How can I put this delicately? Could a tall man manage all right?
Short answer, yes, Chair. Thank you. Long answer.
Colleagues, any other questions? Councillor Candlish.
My mind had gone elsewhere. 6.2. So this goes back to something we were speaking about earlier, about where the additional weight given to local objections where an address has been provided, and there is a specific measure of 300 metres. Now, although we usually rehearse that planning is not about numbers, we all know that there is definitely a strong underlying rule that we start from. Is this something that is now in the way that the planning team are operating? Is it another circle you draw?
No, it's just simply for information, Chair, to try and help clarify about where the extent of concern of the addresses that we're provided with in relation to that particular application. But no, it's not a test of any particular, it's just for information.
Okay, any other questions, colleagues? Okay, comments and proposals? Councillor Mason.
I can see no reason to reject this one. It is well designed. It looks as if it is adequate accommodation for everybody. There is enough space. There is space behind. I propose the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe. I'll second that. Okay. Other comments? Councillor Candlish.
Just two very brief ones. I think this point that we often get to around the comparison between the old and the new, where there is a significant change in the quality of the fabric of the building. For example, insulation, which is both a energy and cost reducer for the tenants and also sound for the neighbours. It would be great if that was kind of brought through a bit more clearly in the reports that we get. And then secondly, also following on from further comments, I think some kind of guideline, some kind of rule that we operate to about where we consider local would actually be useful. And I know it will depend circumstantially, but I think at the moment it's not very transparent.
Okay, thank you. That I'm sure the Council's Planning Office statement on board. Any other comments, colleagues? Okay, we have one proposal which is to grant planning permission, which was proposed by Councillor Mason, secondly by Councillor Judith Smythe. Can I see those in favour? Please show. Can I see those against? Please show. And those abstaining, please show. Okay, planning permission is granted. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to 296 Queen's Road on page 49.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a scheme at 296 Queen's Road for the change of use of the property from a see-through dwelling house to a 7-bed, 7-person HMO. So here's the property here, mid-terrace on the south side of the street. There's a slightly unusual relationship with the two properties to the south. Who have sort of blank flank elevations along the north facing the site, and their gardens off effectively to the side, property shown there. So here's the front of the property, very typical of the properties in the area. In terms of the mix and balance communities, so there's an update to the in the supplementary matters that you've had this morning, just making a minor correction to that 50-metre radius data. That doesn't change our recommendation, as we're still comfortably under the 10% in this instance. So existing plans shown here, very typical of the housing stock in the area. So 3-bed existing dwelling, and the elevations shown there. So in terms of the alterations to this property, it will be extended at ground floor with a rear extension to provide the additional communal living space, and then the loft converted and extended with a dormer and permitted development rights with roof lights to the front. And then you can see the dormer on the side elevation there. So what that means in terms of the converted and extended property is a fairly typical layout of these HMOs that we're seeing. So we've got 2 ensuite rooms, bedrooms to the ground floor, and the communal living space behind. Just in terms of that, bedroom 7 and its window, as you remember from the OS plan, that's south facing, and so although facing into the light well, we're satisfied with light and outlook to that particular room. Up on first floor would be 3 bedrooms, but only there's a shared bathroom in this instance between 5 and 4. And then in the loft there's 2 bedrooms with en-suites. This just shows you the cross-section through. In terms of the comment that we were discussing earlier about sloping, so the 1.5 is a measurement to show kind of usable space, but you'll see that only part of the spaces is at this lower level, and then with these dormer extensions, we get up to a full 2.3 head height fairly quickly, so the bedrooms do have usable full head height spaces. And then just some views of the existing property which hadn't been started in terms of any of its renovation yet, with its existing typical layout, and then just a couple of views of the rear, and then just to see that view down into the light well for the rear facing properties. We just for completeness, we did address this as the Copner Road application earlier, just to clarify this point about the overlapping 50-metre radii between the 2 properties, but it doesn't affect the calculations as the properties themselves don't fall within either radii. So, Chair, with the recommendation, as per the report, and no further updates beyond the correction in the SMAT, we recommend the application for approval.
Thank you very much indeed. Carrie Ann, I think you're the only deputy on this one. But can I... No, so I'll do that later. Okay, leap in.
Thank you. So with this property, all 7 bedrooms, as been explained, meet or exceed 10 square metres and 5 benefit from an ensuite. The required communal area is 22.5 and this property meets that requirement. Additional light is provided into space with the addition of a roof lantern and double doors at the rear. I also want to point out that bed 7 also benefits from a new full-length window to further improve light to that bedroom. 2 of the bedrooms do share a bathroom, but I also want to stress that these will be offered at a lower price point as well, so maybe more affordable to those on a lower income. I ask that you agree with the Planning Officer's recommendation for approval today for an application that is fully compliant with policy. Thank you.
Thanks much indeed. Colleagues, questions? Councillor Shah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, actually. On the ground floor, the windows, they look very small. The officers are comfortable with the windows, especially on the ground floor, for the room size?
Chair, just for clarity, is it room 7, Councillor Adair, that you're referring to? Room 7? Yeah. So the window is there, and in terms of the elevation, that's the window there, so it's full length. I think at the moment, if I go through to the, I think I may have it as a picture. Yeah, so it's a door at the moment. So that gets replaced with a full length window to replace a door and kind of a glazed surround on there. So you can see that already attracts a good amount of light as existing and will be a floor length window instead.
So the door and window both will be a window?
Yes.
Correct, yes, thanks, Chair.
Okay, other questions, colleagues? Councillor Ashmore.
I don't know if anyone will be able to answer it at all, but one of the objections in here talks about, where is it? Sorry, it was on about this, something about unusable corridor spaces in the communal areas. Did they give any context about what that means about unusable corridor?
So, Councillor Ashmore, if you look on page 54, the measurement of the size of the communal area excludes the corridor.
Yeah, Chair, just for clarity, because you can see the door there, and then you've got this corridor up into this point when you're in the main room, and so we've excluded, try not to wiggle it too much, we've excluded that area from our calculation. So we quite often do this to just double check that we are still above the standard of 22.5 square metres, even if without the corridor.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, comments and proposals? In which case, I'm happy to propose officer recommendation. Councillor Valley, thank you for seconding. Are there any other proposals? Any other comments? Okay, can I have those in favour of granting planning permission, please show. Those against, please show. And those abstaining, please show. Okay, thanks very much. The planning permission is granted. Carrie Ann, now we've done that, in the picture, there was a beautiful ceiling rose in the front room. I hope they're keeping that because it's a lovely historic thing and not ripping it out. So what do you do with the lovely ceiling rose that you rip out? But well hidden. Now, okay, fine. No, all right. It's just about aesthetics and history and stuff like that.
But the right choice for the residents, Chair.
Yes. Okay, let's move along to 92 Queen's Road, which is on page 73. This is not a representation of it. It was a bridge, not the house. Well, sorry, it was a screensaver, David. Don't look so bemused.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this scheme is for 92 Queen's Road. Is a change of use from C3, and this is like the earlier application for a flexible use between C3 and C4. So if permission is granted, they can use the property as a small HMO or a C3 dwelling house interchangeably for up to 10 years after permission is granted, if granted. So here's a property here, and again, it's on the southern side of the street, a mid-terrace property. You can see the aerial view there, just in there, in case it's a bit faint with the red line. And it's a property highlighted here, and again, very typical of the nature of the housing stock in the area. So in terms of your mixed and balanced communities, so in this case, we've identified 2 existing HMOs within a 50-metre radius. So if it granted, this would bring it to 3 out of 87 of the properties in the area. And as you see, that's a total of 3.5%, so well below the 10% test in our policy and SPD. So existing floor plans, and this has got slightly unusual layout. It appears to have 2 kitchens and flipped accommodation with a living space upstairs and a loft conversion. That possibly related to a historic consent as 2 flats, although it was converted back into a single dwelling house at some point. That doesn't affect the merits of the scheme. And then this is the existing appearance. So the alterations in this case are just to add a dormer as permitted development, no ground floor extension proposed with this scheme. And what does that mean in terms of layout? So we would have, again, 2 bedrooms at ground floor with a shared bathroom, a sizable kitchen diner with the extension added on for the communal space, and then 3 ensuite rooms to first floor, and then a further room to the roof with an additional laundry, bath, toilet in the loft space as well. In terms of the pictures of the views, the existing property, you can see from the rear there, a neighbouring property has a dormer addition on their property, and you can see the existing kitchen living space there. So, Chair, we set out in the report why we consider the scheme complies with your policies in terms of the density of HMOs in the area and the accommodation provided, and on that basis we're content to recommend it for approval.
Okay, carry on.
Thank you. So this one's slightly different to some of the ones that we've seen on the agenda today. So it's a change of use between C3 and a C3, C4 to allow the owner to flip and change between the 2 uses, which is why the design's slightly different. So on the ground floor, we've had the shared bathroom, so those 2 ground floor rooms could be used as a lounge or dining room quite separately for people if it was in C3 use. We've got an additional laundry room on the top floor, which again could be used for both purposes, with the large kitchen communal area that you're more used to seeing. The communal area, for when it's in C4 use, meets requirement. I just wanted to clarify there isn't 2 kitchens, it is just a laundry room on the top floor, no kitchen, additional kitchen in there. So with that said, I ask that you agree with the Planning Officer's recommendation for approval today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. Questions? Councillor Smythe.
I'd just like to ask a question about occupation. This is an application to use it for 6 people. There is a double bedroom on the top floor. Can we condition it so that that cannot be used by a 7th person, or is it really for 7 people?
So, Chair, so the proposal is to start again. So the proposal is for a flexible use between C3 and C4. C4 has a maximum of 6 occupants. So occupation above 6 occupants potentially is a material change of use and takes it into sui generis, potentially. But yes, in terms of the consent, it allows you to go between a small HMO and a standard C3 dwelling house. So I don't believe the condition is necessary, but you can add it as a safeguard.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay. Proposals? Comments? Thoughts? Councillor Mason?
A comment. C3, C4. It'd be an interesting C3, wouldn't it, with 5 toilets and a washroom?
But they're very popular, Uncle Hugh.
It'd be an interesting family.
Indeed. Do I have any? I'm happy to propose officer recommendation on this. Councillor Sarr seconding. Are there any other comments or any other proposals? No? Okay, can I see those in favour? Please show. Those against, please show. Those abstaining, please show. Thank you. Planning permission is granted. And finally, number 2, St Augustine's Road.
That's what you're on about.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at 2 St Augustine Road, Southsea, for the change of use of a small HMO, 5 occupants, to allow occupation as an HMO with 7 occupants. The applications come in due to the blanket calling request from Councillor Vernon Jackson and a specific recalling requests from Councillors Gerarda and Horton. I should point out right from the outset that although the applicant noted there were 5 existing occupiers, the existing Class C4 consent was not restricted in any way, so could in theory have up to 6 people, and indeed the HMO licences have not been restricted in occupancy either. So we're treating this as 1 extra occupier because they would wish to occupy 7 bedrooms with 7 persons. So St Augustine Road, just off Highland Road, Albert Road, the eastern end of Albert Road. That's Festing Road to the south there, and the Festing pub on the corner. The application site is just a few metres north into St Augustine Road. Thank you. That's the application property there, end of terrace. So this is an existing HMO where occupancy is proposed for an increase of 1 person effectively. For completeness, the area already has 23.43% of the properties, residential properties within 50 metres as HMOs, way beyond the mixed and balanced community guidance. But of course it is already an HMO, and so members are used to understanding that, and there's no change in the relevant balance of numbers of HMOs. It's an increase of 1 person proposed. So members will decide in due course whether or not the application they feel requires planning consent on this matter. Officer's opinion, it does not, and you will come to that in due course. With respect to accommodation space, that's the existing layout with 2 communal rooms at the back and 5 bedrooms and a first floor bathroom. So this application, the property may be extended with a prior approval, which is a rear extension at the ground floor, you can see, which would accommodate the communal space of 26.19 metres squared, in excess of the 22.5 indicated. And then each of the bedrooms, got 2 on the ground floor, both with en-suites, 3, 4 and 5 with en-suites on the first floor, and 6 and 7 on the second floor. Each of those exceed 10 square metres and the relevant head heights. So with respect to the space standards and indeed to the overall configuration, the layout of rooms, outlook and light, officers feel that the standard of living would be appropriate. Just a couple of minor matters to just tidy up on the reports. On page 89, the en-suites, just the last 3 to 7 didn't have a metre squared against them, and we've got 2 corrections thanks to the agent. En-suite 3 is actually 2.83 square metres, and en-suite 5 is 2.77, both in accordance with the guidelines. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks so much indeed. Charlotte, I don't think has been with us today, so I don't think she's going to speak, but carry on.
Thank you. So, as already mentioned, this particular property is an existing C4 HMO, and our client is purchasing the property to fully upgrade it. If you look at the existing plans, it's a 5-bedroom with only one WC and 1 bathroom. So the client is looking to provide 7 fully ensuite bedrooms, and obviously upgrade all of the energy efficiency and up to current building control standards. The required communal area, as you know, is 22.5, and this provides 26.19. A client's also adding double doors and a large roof light to provide as much light into that space as he possibly can. The property also benefits from side access and will provide an easy route into the rear garden for cyclists. I ask that you agree with the planning officer's recommendation for approval today for a fully compliant application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Ashmore.
Yeah, just to check, I was listening there when you said there'd been a correction, because otherwise it would have looked like en-suite 3 was completely not compliant. But I assume that the numbers will be updated before this gets to the next minutes. Is that? just so people don't look back and go, they ignored it or didn't check it.
Yeah, they'll be in the minutes, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordy?
Kerry Ann mentioned, no, sorry, Simon mentioned that the applicant provided those measurements. I was wondering if the officers will go out and measure it for themselves.
Simon, David?
We can't measure it at the moment because the property would be remodelled. I think just about every wall and room would be changed. So licensing, I think we've mentioned this in the last meeting or two, licensing tend to carry out visits post-consent during or after fit-out to check on some of these finer details.
Okay, any other questions, colleagues? Okay, if we move to comments and proposals, I think, as normal, I'm going to propose that this needs planning permission for the reasons given at most meetings, so that I think it's essential that we do keep on making sure that people come back to us with planning applications. So, can I see a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Adair. Can I see those people who are happy with that? Please show. Okay, people who are not happy with... okay, so now we move on to the proposal itself. So we've now said we do need planning application. Matthew, do you want to go and do that again? Okay, shall we just go back in the tape? So that's all right? No, we're all human. Even planning officers are human.
Chair, before you do so, can you give the reason?
The reasons that, I'm sorry, I clearly wasn't very clear in what I was saying. So this is the proposal about whether this application needs planning permission or not. So my reasoning is the normal reasons that it's going from more than 6 people, and the previous planning permission is for 6 people only, and therefore by definition it needs something, planning permission to be something different. And the issues about parking, antisocial behaviour, noise and rubbish, etc. are reasons. Therefore,
the normal thing we say is due to the intensity of the use of the accommodation, the impact on parking, waste, amenity, the impact upon neighbouring residents and the impact on the Solent Special Protection Area, and that's what we normally say.
Excellent, that's very helpful, thank you very much, and I'm sure Simon wrote all that down. If not, you can get it from the minutes from previous meetings. So can I have those in favour of it needing planning permission for this to happen, please show. Thank you, that is unanimous. Next, in terms of it needing planning permission, I'm happy to propose that we give planning permission with the usual conditions, Simon, of bird tax, sill, etc., time to implement.
Yes, so it would
be... And bike storage.
Yeah, the implementation period, the plans references, water efficiency, which relates to the special protection areas, cycle store, completion of the permitted development and prior approval works, and a legal agreement for the special protection areas.
Yep. Okay. I'm happy to propose that. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Shah, thank you. Are there any other proposals? Councillor Ashmore?
Not a proposal, just a clarification, if I'm allowed.
We are deeply flexible here.
I'm glad to hear it. We've heard on previous applications that you can put a restriction on, or not a restriction, but to make sure that the amount of people in it are going to remain the amount of people in it. And I can see, I believe that Central South Sea, the ward this is in, has got the highest concentration of HMOs of any other ward by a country mile. So I can see why the ward councillors there, Susie Horton and Charlotte Joanna, have called that in. It says if this goes ahead, it will only go up by 1 person, which doesn't seem excessive, but is there a way we can put...
Would you like to put a condition on that this
yes,
is a 7 occupants only?
Was, yes.
They couldn't get any more in because none of the rooms are big enough to have double occupancy.
No,
but it doesn't hurt having belt and braces.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. I'm sure, Councillor Shaw, you'll be happy for that. Are there any other proposals? Okay, can I see those in favour of granting planning permission, please show. Those against, please show. Thank you very much indeed. And that's the last application. Colleagues, I understand from Councillor Mason that the backlog of planning applications has been significantly reduced, and therefore I understand that we may move to a 4-weekly cycle, not a 3-weekly cycle, so that there will be fewer meetings, because we've caught up. And so, colleagues, thank you very much indeed, and our colleagues from the planning department, thank you very much indeed for doing the work to catch us up, because it's important that people get decisions on their planning applications within a timely manner. David, you're looking bemused. Are you unhappy with that?
No, it was just complete news to me, Chair, that's all.
Excellent. I'm glad to see that communications from the Assistant Director flow smoothly through the department. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everybody.